Grassroots is having some technical difficulties.
Okay, we can. We're on the. Okay. All right. Welcome today to our viewing audience on Grassroots TV. It's Tuesday, January 26th, about 12 o'clock, and you've tuned into the work session of the Board of County Commissioners. Our first item is department updates and board membership reports. We are going to be talking to the Community Development Department, which includes planning and zoning, environmental health, building plan review, building inspections, any number of great items. And I just wanted to take a half a second to say that when I talked with John Peacock yesterday going over the agenda, he said that he's going to try to restructure our department updates so that they are more closely aligned and describing how they will implement the strategic plan and the budgetary priorities that we set for the year. So this is our first department up under a little more structured format for department updates. Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Rachel. And yes, thank you very much. We've had trying to get this together a little bit with the administrative group that works under John Peacock, and what we want to do today is really relate what you have approved for us in the budget this year. When we went through the budget, from that budget we took and created a work program that we hope will reflect what you would like to accomplish this year. And everything comes back to the strategic plan, what the board is trying to accomplish in the big picture, and how community development is an arm of making that happen for you. And I want to say, before we get started with any of the specifics, that there's going to be a lot of pressure on you this year from our department, because we have big ticket items that are policy oriented items coming your way. I feel like this is a huge year of recalibration, as I said in the memo, of a lot of the things that we just take for granted every day. This year, you will have the master plans coming your way, even though the Planning and Zoning Commission formally adopt them by state statute. They are a big part of what the board looks at in the neighborhoods and how we plan for our land use planning throughout the county. You'll also have the international building codes and the energy code in front of you, which are huge in the way the physical environment happens on our landscape throughout the county. And we also, through the adoption of the master plans and through work with the Planning and Zoning Commission on some pretty large topic areas of the land use code, are going to come back to you, probably not till the very end of the year, but the beginning of the reworking of the land use code, because the code this year is 10 years old. So we've got all that in front of you this year, and it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of requests of you from that higher policy level to tell us whether or not we're meeting the goals that you hear the citizens want. So with that, what I'd like to do is just remind you that in your packet we do have the budget profile that we submitted when we did the budget this year for you. And then what we've done is taken that a little bit further, and we created our work programs in each one of the divisions that Rachel pointed out. The planning division, the building division, planning and zoning, the environmental health division, as well as our long-range planning section. So we have all of that there for a more specific review. But what we thought we'd do today is really jump right to the outcomes of what you can expect this year. And those outcomes that you can expect this year on page 2 of the memo that we sent, we're just going to walk down through those, and each of us give you a little bit of the history and where we're heading with those major topic areas that I tried to explain just a minute ago. But before I do that, Ellen Sassano with our Long Range Planning Division is here. Brian Paul, our Chief Building Inspector, is here. Lance Clark, who's the Assistant Community Development Director and Planning Director. Kurt Dahl, who is our Environmental Health Manager, along with Carla Cahill, who is our Administrative Assistant and helps us pull all this together.
So, we have one other guy sitting.
And of course, he's not in our group, but he works a whole lot with us, is G.R. Fielding, our planning engineer. there who's worked a lot with us on making these things a reality in the physical environment. So,
Rachel, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes,
Real
Patty.
quick one. When you said that you were looking at the budget that we did already approved for 2016, in each of the sections, you do have a section about resources needed or budget proposed changes to the 2016 budget.
Right.
So these are additional increases, or
what's
this
a-
is what we've already approved? Okay, that's
Yeah.
what, I just needed clarification.
It's
So
kind
this
of-
is what's already been approved, you just noted it in here.
Right. We just wanted to kind of give you that memory bank of, we went through this before, we told you what our services and functions were, which you see us every day, we're not going to go through that. And then the trends and the opportunities that we saw, and then what we were specifically asking for, and pretty much what we put forward to the Board of County Commissioners was ratified in the budget. There are a couple things that are more administrative in nature that we're going to have to look at as an organization as a
Right.
whole, like scanning.
And things that might change during the upcoming year, but I just wanted to clarify that so it didn't give me a dollar shock when I went,
No.
we're asking for, this is
No.
stuff we've already moved
You've
forward
already
with.
looked at, we're going to get moving
Right,
on.
perfect.
And that's what gave us our marching orders and why we put together this more specific plan.
Okay.
But you did remind me of one other thing that as we go through these, what we've tried to do is we've said, who do we need to collaborate with to make these things happen? And it's obviously not just ComDev that makes all this happen. So one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit is how are we working with other departments, such as GR, in the engineering department, such as, finance to help us with our cost studies, things like that. And then also externally, who are we working with? Ellen will talk a little bit about how we're working with, obviously all the caucus groups, but Forest Service, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So we wanted you to see what resources we're counting on to help us make this happen.
And
So-
I think it alludes a little bit to potential budget needs in the 2017 budget.
Definitely.
Okay, there we go.
Definitely.
Yeah, there
They're
we go.
setting us up,
And-
right?
Yeah, there we
and
go.
fees.
Yeah, it's a
Thank you.
setup.
Please.
It's a setup. No, I'm trying not to, but there's going to be a lot going on this year. So we're going to start off page 2 of your memo and start with Brian Paul, talking a little bit about the International Building Codes and the Energy Code.
Okay. Well, as you saw from the work plan that the building department brought forward, we're focusing primarily on code adoption for 2016. We're on a 6-year cycle as far as when we adopt the codes. The last code we adopted was the 2009 code back in 2010. So we usually skip the middle cycle so that everybody can kind of get comfortable with the code cycle. So we'll be working on that, and mainly I want to bring that forward as close to its original state as possible. So that's just kind of hopefully a simple review without too many adjustments and addendums and amendments. Because what we want to really focus on is the rewrite of the energy code, the efficient building code, and work on tweaking REMP and adjusting that some. So we're actually working with some consultants already as far as addressing those specific sections. And we hope to bring forward a matrix that shows everything from just basically adopting the 2015 energy code all the way up to net zero ready. And something that maybe ratchets up with the size of a house and increases the requirements based on house size or factors like that. So we hope to bring that forward close to the end of Q1, first part of Q2. So.
Okay. Let me ask the board, do you want to ask questions as we go along through departments, or do you want to wait to the end of the, Michael, please?
Yeah, I applaud your efforts on the energy code. That's great. We had a choice to make supposedly on the new facility, and it was about the energy rating for that new facility. And we were given various levels that we could achieve. And I think that's a possibility for everybody in Pitkin County. I think that's what you're alluding to.
Yes.
Is that given on your house size or whatever, you will have to choose a goal to meet. And I think that's important for us to do. Because I think we have to make an argument in Pitkin County that if we oppose oil and gas development in certain areas of Pitkin County, people can't come back to us and say, well, listen, you're over-consumers of energy because of your house sizes and stuff. We have to be able to straight face say, not only do we want to conserve the environment by putting certain areas off limits, but we're going to make sure that our housing stock is as efficient as it can be. In fact, maybe as efficient as any housing stock in the country. So So I applaud your efforts there.
Thank you. One of the programs we're actually looking at involves that you have to hit a certain percentage of energy performance before you can even start doing renewables and pay offsets and look at ways to offset instead. So that's one thing we're actually weighing is should we set standards that you have to meet prior to doing any kind of offset payment or offset renewables.
That's great.
I also agree. I think that this is very consistent with perhaps what you're looking at the state water plan, where they're trying to say there's going to be X amount of water conservation from passive, meaning just what people do normally or how they build their home, and then additional measures on top. And so we're trying to take the built-in measures for home construction to a higher level, and other buildings as well. So thank you very much. Other questions at this point? Or did you have anything else, Brian?
That was really the gist.
We could
of
talk
the-
about it all day long.
I know.
We could.
And we probably
soon.
will later.
We will be back soon.
It's really exciting right now on all of that. But to move on with the master plans, we have Ellen.
Yeah, 2016 is going to be busy in terms of updating the caucus master plans. Since the master plans most of them were last adopted in 2003, there are a lot of topics that have become relevant that weren't really on the radar in 2003. And so the plans are looking at some of the topics, like marijuana is a perfect example, something that we really weren't focused on in 2003. Now we're, looking at it, is marijuana traditional agriculture? What are the implications for preservation of rural character? A lot of topics around that particular item. Climate change and the need to plan for resiliency, including economic resiliency, emergency preparedness, local food production. What should we be looking at there? Communication, provision of broadband cell service, something we've been focused on in the last year. Senior services needs, mobility needs, transportation needs. The master plans provide a great opportunity for citizens to weigh in, looking forward 5 to 10 years. What are the needs there to maintain quality of life? So we've made a lot of progress so far. I wanted to give you an update on where we are in terms of getting through these plans. We've received several of the updates from the caucuses. The Planning and Zoning Commission has already met with Woody Creek and the Frying Pan Caucus in a preliminary look at their plans. We will meet with the Emma Caucus next week and the Planning Commission. We'll meet with the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus mid-February. The Planning Commission will review that plan in an informal setting, discuss it with the caucus. And let's see, we'll look at the Crystal Caucus plan, hopefully in March. We have just received that plan update. And then we're working with the town of Basalt on development of the so-called GAP area. This is the area along the Highway 82 corridor, just this side of the town's municipal boundary, and up to Snowmass Creek Road. The timing is perfect for collaborating with the town on a plan, because they are just updating their 3-mile plan. This area is within their 3-mile plan boundary area, and this area has implications for the town in terms of future development, as it does for the county. So we're just getting started on that effort with them. We're also working with the Forest Service, as Cindy alluded to earlier, on what we anticipate to be a collaborative management plan in the Castle Creek Valley. This is something that you all have asked for a while now. And the outcome of that plan will be incorporated into the Castle Creek Valley Master Plan update. So that is ongoing. And finally, just to back up a little bit, we set the stage for updating the master plans with the Planning and Zoning Commission. We did several months of upfront work to determine where they believe we need to update our land use regulations to make sure they're still adequately addressing issues relative to growth management, transferable development rights, scenic issues, zoning. Are we zoning it like we mean it? Do our zone districts still function well? They gave us some great preliminary feedback on where changes may be appropriate. And they are going to review the master plans in the context of those discussions that we had about gaps in the land use code and areas that need to be improved. Once we have the master plan updates in hand, then we can look at the discussions that were had by the Planning Commission, identified areas of gaps in the land use code and master plan direction, and take both of those in hand, move forward to start to initiate some land use code amendments to make sure that the code is still up to date, relevant, and addressing the issues that should be addressed looking forward.
Ellen, let me ask you just a couple questions for our public audience. How many caucuses are there in Pitkin County?
There are always 10. I'm going to say 10 in that vicinity.
Okay.
We don't formally have a couple right now, but they're working on it.
Yeah.
And there are some that, so for the moment, let's say 10.
Okay. And then how would residents in a caucus area who for some reason have not yet been participating, how would they review the drafts, or how would they get involved?
We have on the county webpage, there is a caucus link, and you can go to the caucus web pages to find contacts within the caucus. That's a good place to start.
To contact your caucus chair.
To contact the caucus chair to find out when the next meeting is. Several of the caucuses actually have meeting dates listed on the webpage. And/or feel free to call me. I'm happy to provide any help I can in making sure that people are involved to the extent they'd like to be.
Okay. Thank you for that. I saw George's hand first, and then we'll start around. Go to Patty.
Ellen, so the 3-mile gap from Basalt heading up to Old Snowmass, right now that area is still under the guidelines of the 1987 Down Valley Master Plan.
Yes, that's correct.
So that's
It was
never
a good plan.
That was a good plan, but that really set the stage for maintaining the rural character of Pitkin County. So, but what you're going to now try to do is not only update that, but in collaboration with Town of Basalt, because Town of Basalt doesn't really stretch into that area, but just sort of curious what their input would be.
Well, do you want to answer? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Still your spot. Well, we think of it sort of like the Aspen Area Community Plan. It's their area of influence. And obviously, whatever happens in that area is really important to the town of Basalt. It's their entrance, if you will. It's their exit, if you will. It's all of that. But we actually are hoping to kind of ride on their coattails a little bit in the whole planning process, because many of the people who live in that area associate themselves with Basalt, and they want to be a part of that. So we're hoping to get some survey work out to answer some questions all around city and county kinds of issues, but mainly because the state allows and requires that Basalt do a 3-mile plan. We want to be part of that. We want to have a county voice in that 3-mile plan as well. And because we've never really engaged the citizens in that corridor in a caucus or in a real planning effort since '87, I think they're going to have a lot to say right now, given various uses that are up and down commercial now along the highway, some that have been there a long time but have never really been acknowledged as full-on commercial, and then obviously the residential and some of the trail system in the area, more and more connections there, our work with the BLM on access in that area as well. I think there's just a lot of overlapping issues that entire community is going to want to voice, but we are still working on the details with the town of Basalt, and we're looking at a consultant to work with both of us on that, who we want to look at the actual functionality of who actually adopts what. I obviously have, an idea of the best way to do that, but we need to work together on that in terms of what plans get adopted by whom, or if there's an intergovernmental agreement, how that works.
And then how about going the other direction, going west with that 3-mile gap? You run into Eagle County, which has done a Mid-Valley master plan, but part of that incorporates the town of Basalt as well. So will you be able to have input into looking at that side of the?
We're talking about, there are a couple of gap parcels. They're not going further down valley and also to the south that don't really fit in a caucus. One of the first things we did when we went out to the caucus roundtables is we asked caucuses if they were willing to engulf some of the other areas so that we wouldn't have to create a new caucus area. And none of the caucuses wanted to do that. They were really happy with their boundaries. So we're dealing with some little bits and pieces, and we just have to kind of work through that as we go. But our intention is to touch every Pitkin County parcel with some kind of plan.
Yeah, I guess my question was, as we're inviting Basalt to weigh in on the Pitkin County parcels up valley from the town of Basalt, do we have the ability to weigh in on the parcels
County?
down valley?
With Eagle County?
With Eagle County and the town of Basalt?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely. They always ask us to review their plans.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at Ellen's face, and I think we could certainly forward Basalt our comments to Eagle that are related to our boundary and within our zone of influence. But in terms of technically, they might be on the far side of a formal comment to Basalt in their 3-mile zone. Is that kind of what you're thinking? I mean, you certainly can communicate issues, but it may not be within the boundaries of what is known as a 3-mile zone of influence or something.
Yeah, I don't know. We have worked with Eagle County on their, it's not really, that area isn't part of their 3-mile. Eagle County's, it's the jurisdictional boundaries are really different in that area than they are on the east side of Basalt. So, it wouldn't be so much a 3-mile question as it would be just a question of cooperating with Eagle County and Basalt on planning in that area, which we have through referrals and through review of plans.
Yeah.
And Basalt's 3-mile, I mean, we have cooperated in the past with Basalt and manifested is yet to be seen, whether they'll be separate little area plans or just communication.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Eagle County said they would do would be to recognize our caucus areas that overlaps into Eagle County. So whether it be the Emma caucus, where you have one side of the road is Pitkin, the other side is Eagle, or even up the Frying Pan. So we built that relationship with their planning department, and their commissioners have, as far as I know, have agreed to respect and honor the wishes of land use recommendations from those specific caucus areas.
Right.
And we have and will continue to work with Eagle County. They will get our plans for referral comments and vice versa.
And they've given us great feedback on some of the preliminary ones, like the Frying Pan already. It's definitely, the detail when you get into how that actually works on the ground, and we're still working through some of that with Eagle County.
Any other questions at this time, George? Okay, Patty's next, and then Michael.
I apologize this is just kind of a heads up. I went to a meeting last week in Basalt with Eagle County and Basalt about child care issues. Just a heads up, that's going to be moving forward about where we can put child care facilities in that Mid-Valley region and within caucuses, homeowners associations, et cetera, trying to look at the requirements and restrictions to put in child care and what we can do to make it so it's not as difficult to create childcare facilities. So I don't know if it's come up in the discussions with the master plans, but I'm giving you a heads up. I've been asked to bring it back to community development in Pitkin County to just keep it in mind as we're going through the process.
And we've noted that because we did, when we were working with BOCC, we knew that might be coming
Yeah.
up. So when we're looking at the land use code, we're going to look at any barriers and any
Perfect.
legalities about childcare in homeowners associations and things like that.
Perfect. Yeah, because I was getting quite the pressure at the meeting. It's interesting. Everybody was looking at Pitkin County, and, you know. The other issue is a little more fun. Another question I have, since we are talking about marijuana, and I have heard some possibility, some interest in hemp crops moving into the Upper Valley. So that, I don't, you know, it's a different crop, but it looks a lot alike, so it has some of the same issues and concerns. I mean, if somebody was to spring up with a crop of hemp in a neighborhood, people might be wondering why they're growing a huge marijuana field. So just keep that in mind too. I think that's going to be moving up into the Pitkin County realm, and we're going to have to be addressing that.
It has come up in at least one of our caucus plan discussions. And, yeah, we'll work.
Because it's actually a great crop, great water use, great opportunities for the products that can be coming of it, but it's going to have some other snags that come along with it. Thanks.
Okay, Michael?
I noticed that there's no draft master plans on not Wood Creek, but caucus plans on the website. So you're going to put them on the website? People need to be able to access them.
Yes, you're right. And they are not there. I believe some of the draft plans are on some of the caucus pages and not on all of them. So we need to be consistent and get them all updated with drafts.
Because you said they're all complete now, aren't they?
No.
They're
No.
not. Who's complete?
Well, Woody Creek has submitted their complete plan with some changes that the P&Z recommended that I'm not sure if all those have been updated, but that, and then also the frying pan, we went through that last week, where the frying pan submitted their plan, but there were changes by the P&Z recommended, and not just P&Z, but referral agencies. And then, who else did we have? Emma, we've walked through that with the Emma caucus, so those are in the process of being reviewed, but the P&Z will look at that next week.
We've received the Snowmass Capital
Snowmass.
Creek Caucus draft and just received the Crystal River draft as well. So they are in progress. Some of them are still being updated to some extent, and so some have been posted on web pages and others have not. But we will eventually get drafts. They're in progress drafts for the public to see on
our website. But also, just to let you know that it seems like most caucuses now have their own website, which is separate from the county's website, and they prefer to update those. So we just have to stay on top of it and get those on the public website as well.
Yeah, I think since it's a public process, it should be on our website.
Right. Yeah.
At least the submitted drafts, and then propose changes, so people can follow without having to come to a P&Z meeting.
Right.
Sort of what the dialogue is. And I think that'd be helpful for public knowledge.
Absolutely, no, good
And I
comment.
think Jeanette is in the process of reworking the website to specifically come up with a system for caucuses to hit easy access. So she's working on that right now.
Good.
Can I get, what about
Additional
the
Pat?
east of Aspen? Are they, I know we don't have a lot, are they working on it?
Yeah, east of Aspen, most of the folks who come to the east of Aspen caucus meeting once a year are people who are not here full-time.
Right.
We have a local representative, Ryan Smalls, who is helping us.
Oh, okay.
He's helping us with the master plan. He did a little survey of all the people and really got very little response about any changes that they'd like to see. So I think as staff, we're going to start to step in and say, okay, because we did give an initial grouping of topics that Ellen went over, climate change, emergency preparedness, those kinds of resiliency types of things to the caucuses. And it's their choice as to whether or not they submit those, and then the P&Z can say whether or not they think that they're necessary. So at this point, that caucus has not given us much in terms of change, but we want to just continue to put in some of the newer topics and talk with them about that. So we'll kind of be working with them.
Because I know broadband is a huge issue for
Broadband, they're on it. We
Yeah.
hear from them regularly now.
Well, I'll touch base with Ryan too. I see him because he comes over to visit his dad in the neighborhood, so I'll try and touch base. Just let him know if he has any questions. He can always contact me too.
And the Maroon Creek Caucus is up and running now.
Right.
They've had their first meeting last night to discuss master plan issues. And we're working with the Castle Creek Caucus.
To become a caucus.
To finalize their caucus formation and then move forward on plan development. And there's Brush Creek and Owl Creek. So there's several out there that we're going to need to continue to develop.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other board comments on this part? Well, the only two comments I have are that I think it's going to be really important with the broader workload that you described, Cindy, of your department and needing to interface with the BOCC, that we try to really phase it across the whole year and not have it kind of pile up in August and September when we're starting to get into budget hearings and extra meetings then. We start today at 12. This time of year, we tend to start later because we don't have as full agenda. So while it might not be the full master plan, if there's other pieces of your workload that you need to schedule and get in front of us, I think it's going to be important to try to spread it out throughout the year.
And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things we'll be bringing for you in March.
Okay, very good. And the other comment more directly to the caucus practice and my master planning, I agree with all the comments that have been made about trying to get the drafts up there and, give people a chance to really look at it. And so for me, it's important that the caucus's master plans acknowledge the uniqueness and the characteristics and the goals and desires of these individual areas, but also acknowledge at a deep level that we are one county. And we're not just, 10 different areas, and we've all outlawed all the tough, ugly uses that society needs, and we expect everything to go somewhere else. And so I think that that's a really important component, that we look holistically as a county and our role and our place and our desires, our niche within that county.
And what we plan to do is once we have the individual caucus master plans, we will then take them and compile them into a county comprehensive plan and identify the common threads and continuity between them all to provide more general direction for the county as a whole. And so they won't just be piecemeal, but they will be brought together in the end as an overview for direction in the future, moving forward for the county.
And how they potentially could affect existing programs such as TDRs and things like that.
Yes.
And that's the reason why all these meetings with the P&Z right now are preliminary work sessions, to take a look at the master plans, give them back to the caucuses with some comment, and then, as Ellen said, in the end, the P&Z will adopt them all together, but with what we hope are consistency and continuity based on the overarching policy plan that we have for the land use code.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
So, but if a caucus would suggest that they rezone for mobile homes throughout the caucus area, you wouldn't necessarily adopt that, would you?
Well, the P&Z would look at it, and the P&Z would say, well, we don't believe that's consistent with, or we do believe that's consistent with, blah, 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 and then ask them to make changes, ask the caucus to make changes. If they don't care to make those changes, the P&Z has the legal authority to adopt a plan with what it wants or not, what it doesn't want to have within that plan. So the P&Z is the authority over the county comprehensive plans. Now, caucuses have said, well, if you don't want this, we don't care if you adopt our plan or not. So that's a whole nother aspect to looking at these neighborhoods and these plans. But ultimately, it's the job of the Planning and Zoning Commission and our job to get the Planning and Zoning Commission to adopt a comprehensive plan for the entire county, so that, in fact, the entire county is planned. We are mandated by state law to do that. We are one of just several counties that has been we have to adopt a comprehensive plan. So, yeah, there can be struggles within that. It's not all easy.
So there's some tension within
Could
that
be.
process.
Could be. But yeah, in fact, every time we look at a plan, it's either over a mobile home park or, some other facility. It's, it's never, it hasn't been smooth with any neighborhood.
So there might be some fundamental disagreements within those caucus plans vis-à-vis the comprehensive county plan.
Could be.
Patty?
Doesn't a code amendment, though, eventually come back to the BOCC?
That's how it works. And as Ellen pointed out, we're working with all the neighborhoods because right now, the philosophy of Pitkin County is that we really value these neighborhoods and their input, and that's why we created the caucus system. Now, but ultimately, through that system, it's the responsibility of the Board of County Commissioners to turn something into law with the land use code. So it's got all these different checks and balances throughout. The Planning and Zoning Commission might challenge the Board of County Commissioners on some policies. I don't know, and come back to you. And then we work all that through. But ultimately, what really hits the ground with the regulations is the county commissioners adopting the land use code.
So if there's something that moved forward through the caucus, through the P&Z, came to us, and we really found it as really extreme or really flying in the face of the county as a whole, we would have the opportunity to move it forward or not move it forward.
And that's why we're putting all the plans into a work session mode before we adopt anything, because we want to make sure there's consistency. And as you remember, we typically don't ask the P&Z to adopt the plans until it's ratified by you guys, and we go through a process of a work session where we say, hey, these may be some red flags, what do you think? And then it comes back
We can
around.
have that discussion at length before we go to the effort of doing code amendments.
Right.
Great. Per Michael's example, or a variation of it, we obviously have to follow state law.
Right.
So while you might have the zoning and subdivision ability to say no new mobile home park, if that's the desire, you couldn't say to someone, you can't have a manufactured home on a legitimate lot.
Right.
Because that's a state law about equity there. So of course, we're in conformance with state law. Of course. Okay, thank you.
So now, with all
Next.
that said, Lance is going to explain where we're going with the land use code and how that works, but I think we just kind of talked about it.
Oh, we kind of did. You are all very familiar with the planning and zoning because you see us every other week, if not every week, and you realize that we process on the average 120 land use applications a year. You only see 25 or 30 of those in actuality. Most things that we do are site plan reviews and activity envelopes, which are done administratively, and really only come to you when there's a problem, when someone appeals or objects. A conflict.
Bring us the easy
A
stuff.
disagreement.
What do we do?
Opportunity.
Of some sort. And through our revenues from land use applications and floodplain permits and access permits and earth moving permits, we did meet budget in 2015. I think it's important to make it very clear, as you can see from our budget profile, that making budget doesn't mean making costs. We're a long way from covering our costs in planning, building, and zoning with our revenues, but we are covering budget. We frankly are looking to building permits to cover the overall department costs and make up for the fact that planning and zoning is really kind of a loss leader.
You mean people aren't paying to participate in this caucus master planning process
Yeah.
that takes 2 years?
Actually, they'd like us to pay them because they're doing a lot of work.
We have
Okay, I agree with that. Bad joke. Here you go.
But we anticipate 2016 to be just as active as 2015. We don't really see any change. In fact, we've been doing a lot of pre-application summaries this winter. People are still moving forward, and as Brian can tell you, the building permits have not slowed to the extent we actually could use a little relief. They have not. So
We were
we
hoping to win the
anticipate.
lottery, but we didn't.
Yeah. So we anticipate 2016 being very much like 2015. But our big change in the outcome, and Patty, what you said, we've already budgeted for. You have adopted in our budget this year some money for really working on the land use code. The land use code that I still refer to as the new code, which is 10 years old now. And as you know, because you see every code amendment, we've tried to bring things to you when we can, and we've tried to deal with the emergencies. You'll remember we did special events because that kind of rose to the surface. We did a major floodplain rewrite because that rose to the surface. We did a tree removal because of what
We
was
had trees
going on
removed.
last summer. And we did the growth management exemptions and FLORA exemptions for people providing disabled access to homes. We did some very important things, but we simply can't, with our regular staff, with Mike and Suzanne and me, get that list of code amendments that's now as long as your arm. So we did put some money in the budget in 2015 for consultant help, 2016, and, right, and also in the 5-year budget, we showed a need again in 2017 probably. So we've budgeted money to hire some consultant help to deal with a lot of those long lists of code amendments that we simply haven't been able to get to, as well as we're anticipating some initiatives coming out of the master plans that will require some code amendments. And so we're not talking about writing a new land use code, but we're not talking about trying to do a pretty comprehensive catch-up with the things that we would like to do in the code. And that's what you were just saying, Rachel. That's, late summer, fall kind of thing, but we'll try to, I think it'll be going into 2017. And
Yeah.
so it won't all bunch up at the end of the year. And that's going to be our major thrust of something different than what you have usually seen from us year after year.
I'm just hopeful that we can start blocking off the time and then maybe, knowing that's going to be August, say, okay, we're going to need, some 3-hour work sessions across the spectrum. Patty?
Yeah, since I've had the honor and privilege of doing land use code revisions a couple of times now, one of the things, and I don't know how this has changed, we had amendments, we had so many amendments that it was getting a little clustered, in there. So I think this process also helps us make it more of a clean document. But now with everything being on the computer, is it easier? Remember, it used to have to be things were just stuck here and there. Is it now, because everything's kind of online, it's easier to electronically change and clean
It
up?
totally is, because Jeanette, we no longer send code updates out to a company to be done. Jeanette Jones from the
able
clerk's
to.
office does them in real time. Very quickly after a code amendment is done, it appears online in the code.
In the right place.
And almost everyone we work with now uses the online code. We haven't sold a paper code in
And
years.
since my years, old
Do we
years.
even have?
We have them available. We will print them for people and they can buy them. But people universally go online and we have them updated
Because that was a
within
huge problem in the
months.
past. Because
Yeah.
you'd have to flip to the amendment section and bring it back into the current section you were
Right.
trying. So, yeah, so I was hoping that, and Jeanette does an amazing job for that, so we do appreciate that effort. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions on this portion? Michael?
Lance, do you think the P&Z meeting should be publicly broadcast?
We have talked about that, and when Granicus first started, we were anticipating that maybe we could try to use the Granicus system, not grassroots, but try to do it ourselves with Granicus. And technologically, it never really got smooth enough for us to be comfortable doing it. But how can one not say it would be a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, how many cases did you review last year? 100 and something?
Yeah, but most of those are administrative. The Planning and Zoning Commission doesn't see those either, but they do have some meaty things on their agendas.
Right, so, I mean, I think, for the public, there's no forewarning of those meaty issues coming up, although administratively and publicly, those meetings have occurred, but people have no idea they're even being considered. So it's just a way of easing the public into the process of how things move through the county. And at the P&Z level and then at the commissioner level. I think it's something I think we should consider as commissioners.
We can get with Pat Bingham and Susan Murphy and sort of reinvestigate that system to see if it is more accommodating than it was, 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, because they're actually moving to a new system now.
There's someone waving, yes, it is in the back. So.
We're meeting with Pat tomorrow to go over the system so that you guys can kind of have more
Great.
control over that.
Can I just add to Michael's thing? But the P&Z meetings are posted, so the public knows the items are coming up. They would just have to attend the meeting. This way, if Michael's suggestion was to come to fruition, they would be able to go online or however and pull up those meetings, and they wouldn't have to appear in the room, which would make public participation easier.
At least people would be more aware when they want to jump in.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah,
a good thought. I'd like to investigate the costs naturally, and everything has to be relative. But it's certainly something to take a good look at, and it may be particularly easier once we're actually in the newer meeting room, which is going to have more better electronics and technology
Much more better.
than this poor room. So that will be that. And then just to remind the board, we have about another 40 minutes on this topic, and we'll allow Cindy to move on with her presentation.
Thank you. Now we have Kurt Dahl, who's in charge of our environmental health department. And we didn't have a bullet specifically, but Kurt's working on some things that, once again, are, measures that you will see this year, and let Kurt take that.
Hi, good afternoon. So, as you've heard from planning and building, our business, we've increased permits every year, and we continue to do that. We anticipate that, we'll be at the same levels at least as of the last couple of years. To boil down our work plan, really a couple of things. We're looking at using technology to create greater efficiencies in our department and better internal and external customer service. And then the other one, surprise, surprise, it revolves around codes and regulations and, either being part of a stakeholder process with the state or federal government, either implementing regulations that have just changed. We just talked about childcare. We inspect childcare facilities. Those regulations just changed and went into effect 2 weeks ago. And so not only do we have staff training to work with, but we also, have to get that information out to all their providers that we now have new regulations. And then regulation development as well. One of the exciting things that I've talked a little bit about is gray water regulations. And the state plumbing code has now been amended. That will take effect in February 14th, Valentine's Day.
Good day for plumbing code.
Good day for plumbing code. That has been the holdup for the past several months. The gray water regulations are a two-part requirement to change. There's the health side, which is what my department deals with. We adopted regulations at a state level, and we were part of the stakeholder process earlier last year. And then the state plumbing code actually had to change to allow for local jurisdictions to adopt the allowance for gray water plumbing in facilities. As I mentioned, the state has actually done that. So what will happen now is the building department will work together. They will have to adopt the plumbing side of the code, and then my department will actually create the health side of the state or the health side of the gray water regulations based on the state code. The two uses are internal toilet flushing and external irrigation. So Those are the two permitted uses right now. Both the plumbing code and the health code do allow for that. There was some question as to whether or not both were going to allow for that. There are a number of other uses, but at this point, the state was not comfortable with allowance for that. We'll start with these two, and then I'm hopeful that the state will come back and address some of the other potential uses, fire suppression, things like that, that they didn't feel comfortable with at this point.
Let me ask, Kurt, is that for all residences or just residences on wells? In terms of the return flow, I'm thinking of the
Right.
legal aspect side.
My understanding is that those are for, the water rights issue has come up, and I believe right now it's for rural areas, but it does depend on how the water rights are set up for whatever water system is delivering water. And so we'll have to look at that as part of our permitting process, who can and cannot do that. One of the concerns was when you're on a well, if it's a domestic-only well, that you may not have the right to actually do.
Outdoor irrigation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in our county, a lot of residences have irrigation rights associated with their well, and so that'll alleviate that concern. But I know in other parts of the state that's an issue that they have not resolved yet.
Okay. As long as we're just working with the attorney's office and the water side of it as well.
Right.
Other parts of your presentation?
The other piece of the puzzle that we're changing, and we've been talking about for years, is noise code. We've hired a consultant to look at the noise code and make changes. It's been on our table for a while. The last time we rewrote that was in 1999, so it is definitely due for an update, looking at clarifying the language. I think one of the important things with our noise code is that we're looking at tying it better to land use and special events.
Yes.
And
firework permits.
Yes, yes. Firework permits, urban growth boundary, there's some differences between our noise code right now and the city of Aspen, and so we're, looking at whether or not there needs to be some coordination there or not. That we haven't made that determination, but it's certainly one of the things that we've been looking at. And so, again, late spring, I anticipate we'll start looking at bringing, at least a draft to you guys to start discussing. Right now, the consultant is working on coordination with the Forest Service, the Sheriff's Office. We'll look at a to-be-determined code enforcement officer. There are a number of stakeholders that we've identified, including the public, that we will start getting these out to as we get further along in the process.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Michael?
Well, one of the county's challenges is that you have ordinances and regulations, and then you have the other side of it, which is enforcement. And so how is the community development going to balance that?
No, we have just been working with John and John Ely and Brian Pettit, and we're looking at all those various codes that need to be enforced. And as you know, we've had a code enforcement officer in the past, and that position's still on the books from an employee perspective. So we've put out a request for applications, and we're going to be interviewing hopefully the first part of February. We got 13 responses for that position. And the position for now will be housed in community development, but we see some sort of a system, almost a work order kind of a system, because it's really to be utilized, the position's to be utilized by anyone who has a code in the county that needs to be enforced. So we are looking at trying to get that position hired this spring.
So if they would enforce Kurt's code, environmental, or
It could do the noise, it could do our land use code, it could do parking, that along county road right-of-ways. It could help with our construction management plans. There's a whole variety of, codes that we have. Bear ordinance out of the landfills, where that one lives.
Yeah, because we have an environment of lots of regulations in terms of a county our size, and very little ability to deal with people who aren't willing to follow those regulations.
So we hope that person won't die in the first 6 months, because there's a lot to do.
George?
Two questions. First, which closet are you going to be
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
spacing in?
Well, yeah. Yeah.
And then the more serious question is,
We haven't said it, but, you know, that person's gonna need a car, so we hope that they don't mind just sitting in that
Mobile office.
Mobile office.
Just tell them to roll the window down when the heat
in the past, that position has sort of had its ebbs and flows. So they'd be really busy during perhaps the summer months, and then they'd be really quiet in the winter months. So is there a way to utilize this person, cross-train them to help with the workflow that you're experiencing?
I'm very excited about that.
So you'll have some cross-trainings to be able to help. Okay.
So they don't get
Our
bored.
zoning folks now do a lot of the enforcement. I was gone for like 10 days for something, and I came back, and the first thing out of everybody's mouth was, we are beyond here with code violations and enforcement need. And that wasn't only coming from our staff in community development, that was coming from Brian Pettit's staff. And I don't think the bear thing was too crazy right then, but yeah, I mean, we've heard it loud and clear, and I think that we've definitely got a work program that can keep this person busy. And noise is a great example. We were working with Carrington for quite a while, who was our last zoning enforcement officer, to try to help us with that noise code. So there are projects that we can hopefully get this person to work on as it's quieter.
Other questions? Cindy?
One other thing that, from a big policy perspective with environmental health, that it's just always behind the scenes, but we've had the board weigh in on it before because it's your purview, but we continue to serve the public through restaurant inspections. We lose money as a county on that endeavor because the state only reimburses us $10,000, something like $10,000 a year to do all the restaurant inspections. We also partner with the town of Snowmass Village to inspect their restaurants, and we do the restaurant inspections in BOCC.
Part of BOCC.
Part of BOCC that is also, I thought we did Eagle counties, but we don't.
No, we don't.
Okay, so we partner on that, but the board in the past, from a policy perspective, said that is critical. We don't want to lose that. It's something we're willing to subsidize with the general fund. So I just wanted to point out again, that's another one of your broader policy scopes that, you know, we work with every day. And I think we checked in on that a couple of years ago with the budget and determined that was still something we want to do locally because we feel like we have a better handle on it than the state would have if they sent somebody up once a year to take a look.
Once a year to talk to 5 restaurants.
So
George?
So the city of Aspen or the town of Snowmass Village or town of BOCC, they don't have a designated person?
City of Aspen does.
City of Aspen
Town of
does.
BOCC,
Town of
Town of
Snowmass.
Snowmass Village?
town of,
Oh, wait, where are you going?
Slow down, one of you answer.
Yeah.
Who do we inspect?
We do everybody
inspect.
inside Pitkin County with the exception of the city of Aspen. The town of BOCC and Snowmass Village do not have local board of health and do not do restaurant inspections. So that's part of our consumer protection contract then with the state to do those.
Okay.
And it's not common for local municipalities to have a health inspection. It typically is a county-run program.
Other comments?
Good.
Michael?
Well, it comes from a heritage of Tom Dunlop, I think, really of it's not really about inspections as much about education and allowing people to learn about sanitation practices in the food service business, because a safe food service means good tourism, and a community can't afford to have poor inspections. And if it's an annual inspection by the state of Colorado, it's just not adequate for a bustling tourist economy like we have. So that's why I would support whatever inspections you have, and we can work at the state level to increase those reimbursements. But I want a food inspection program that benefits Pitkin County and the health of people who visit Pitkin County.
I agree. I think it's a customer service piece as well. The state just cannot provide the level of customer service that we can in terms of education and in terms of knowing the locals. And, they know who to call if they have questions. So I think that's a really important piece that the state's not able to supply, and it's not necessarily their fault. That's just the fact that they're in Denver and not here all the time. Thank you.
I've always thought it'd be great if we could get our local Colorado Mountain College to offer even some of the preliminary restaurant courses for food safety handling. Maybe not teaching someone how to be a chef. They can. It'd be great to have those sort of internships here as well. But because that's the challenge would be how do you really reach so many new and turnover employees each year, and then also be efficient with your time when you may be really having to train and re-educate just one kitchen's worth of staff at a time, another kitchen's worth of staff at a time. So I think it'd be great if we could continue to think about ways in which we might be able to expand that to capture a larger group at once. Perhaps through the Chamber of Commerce or Snowmass Resort Association, when they do their employee indoctrinations and things like that, you might be able to get a class type of setting in afternoon at the Wheeler Opera House and really go over a lot of the basics at once with a larger group. But I don't know. I don't want to create new work for you. I'm just saying it'd be nice to find a way that we could reach more people than kind of what is restaurant by restaurant as you have to go through. I'm sure there's a lot of duplication of comments and services.
Right. One of the cool things we do is we partner with a company out of Nevada that does online education for us, and there's not a fee to us, but there's like a $5 fee that somebody can take an online course and get a credential.
Yeah.
They can take it at their own leisure, but we do partner and with the city and do education for like the larger companies like Ski Company. I know Brian was they will call him in and actually have him at the beginning of the season come in and actually do large groups so that we hit as many new folks as we can every year.
That's great. That's great. Pat?
The other opportunity might be the local cooking schools. They have a space available with kitchens set up that you could actually have a hands-on kind of just a thought, because I know. Yeah, and then you could go on in learning how to cook.
Yeah. Wait, are you saying I don't know how to cook?
Are there other?
My wife called me on that one.
I have one other question from your memo. The on-site wastewater treatment regulations, you said the states, they're going into effect now, and Pitkin County will go into effect in, I think, 2018. What's the need for the lag?
So, well, we're in the stakeholder process right now with the state redoing their regulations. The state is now, at least the Department of Environmental Health and Sustainability is looking at all of the regulations that they are enforcing or responsible for and redoing them every 3 years. So even though we just adopted regulations in 2014, they adopted theirs in 2013. They're on a cycle. We're in the stakeholder process of redoing the state regulations. That's not completed yet. And probably will be about another year before the state completes theirs, and then we'll need to go through and look at what they've changed and update our code.
Okay, so we do have a code in effect now.
We do,
absolutely. I just was
Yeah.
confused by the memo.
Okay.
It said the new regs won't take effect till 2018.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an update to the regulations once the state updates theirs again.
Okay,
So,
great.
yeah.
Anything else on your presentation or
No, that was-
questions from the board?
Good.
I have two things.
Okay, please.
Two things more, real quickly, to round out our discussion. Not only do you hear about what we do and how we interface with the public, it's how we do it. And we've got a couple things that we're going to bring back to you on how we do it to help us do the best job that we can. We have worked now, you've sent us back on our look at our fees, and we've worked with our finance department on a cost study analysis of our department. And we are going to be coming back before you in March to talk about the building fees and how that relates to our operation as a whole. And so we just wanted to let you know that, we've looked at it from a couple different angles. What is sustainable? What are your desires, and what do they continue to be for our service levels and our continued, such as the building department, our turnaround time on a building permit, our turnaround time on a planning application, or the time that we respond to a public health event, those kinds of things. What levels of service do you want to see? And we want to give you some alternatives in looking at that with our fee schedules. We also think, just in general, our fees are very confusing, the way they work. We have what we like to call the funky chart that someone who is applying for a building permit has to go through, and it's pretty, it's pretty confusing. So we want to make the methodology more simple, and we feel like we've got some alternatives for you to look at on that regard as well. So that's one thing I wanted to let you know. We're going to come back to you in March in a work session on that. And then we also wanted to let you know that we've been working with our new BITS department and on technology. And we're all playing different roles, and we're learning how to work a little differently with our new in-house technology. And so we are now, as ComDev, we're the customers of the BITS department. And the BITS department has done a great job at helping us look at they looked at many, but they narrowed it down to 3 alternatives for our tracking system in community development. And we're in the process now of coming down to looking at, hopefully very soon, having our electronic plan submittals, so that contractors don't have to drive up to our office and give us their big roll of paper. We can look at it, we can receive it electronically, we can review it electronically internally, as well as with our referral departments, and go a lot less paper, and hopefully be a lot more efficient in that tracking. So that's coming up very quickly. As well as we're looking at the routing of our permits and our planning and environmental health. So just to let you know, we've been working with the BITS department on that, and that's all kind of handled more internally with the budget that we've looked at with you, with BITS and admin. But just wanted to let you know that was going on as well, and it's kind of a new day for all of us, and we're very pleased with how we've been working with BITS.
That's good feedback. Michael?
So, when you get those plans, they're large scale, and then when you translate them to screen size,
We have big screens.
how big are your screens?
We've been getting them.
Yeah, 2 years ago, or
32
3 years ago, I
inches,
guess, when we
something like
started looking at CSI, we actually purchased the 32-inch diagonal
It's
screens.
like a big TV.
So we're
Crime scene
prepared.
investigations?
Yeah,
Ultra high
CSI was,
definition.
that was the other software we were looking at.
So in other words, the screen size is going to be approximate to the actual
Plan
plan
size.
size.
Well, it's on
Not
scale.
that large, but and there is no scale when you get things digitally, so we can blow it up to any size we want within the
Within the screen
software that
itself.
we're working.
It's really pretty cool. You can circle.
So you could project it if
We
you
could,
needed to see it large.
yeah. We thought about if we wanted to do like a group submittal or a pre-submittal meeting, having a larger screen in a conference room that more than one person could sit, take a view of the plans. So
We don't have one that big, but we've got a
Thinking
TV
about
size one we can use.
there's one down in Bits I was thinking about borrowing.
Great,
pretty
well,
cool.
that's super.
Sitting here thinking, we have about 20 minutes left, and I didn't know, Cindy, if you wanted to tell us how GR integrates with your department, since he's been
Sure.
sitting here for the whole.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'll let GR talk about it too, but just real quickly, come on up. We have, I'm thinking through it right now, GR is working with us on Castle Creek, and very involved with the planning side of things with the U.S. Forest Service. Castle Creek, as you know, is only 9% private land. The rest of it's Forest Service, and we access into the wilderness there. And parking has become quite the issue for Castle Creek, for the homeowners, all of that. So GR, with the whole road system up there, some of which we only maintain for the Forest Service, some of which is our county-owned right-of-ways, some of which probably are just, been used for a long time the way they've been used. But we're doing a pretty in-depth look right now. Ellen just finished a look at all of the parking spaces along Castle Creek and what those mean and how many cars it accommodates and what the uses are. And GR's been, reviewing those nodes, if you will, for how it works from his perspective. And so we look at that, some of the road counts that we've looked at, all of that is integrated. When you adopt, when the P&Z adopts a master plan, oftentimes it has real, physical implementation, such as the underpass at the ABC. And the action item is, okay, let's get this capital improvement built. So we throw it over to GR. Or if the road needs to be widened in a certain place because of this or that, let's throw it over and put it on these guys' work plan. So that's kind of how we've been working a lot more with the capital improvement plan coordination.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah,
there?
and is there any special projects that are coming that you've been referred to that have to do with Cindy's department?
Well,
Other than the underpass, that was quite special.
well, honestly, in being more integrated into some of the master planning process now, the great opportunity for us is to listen to what conversations arise about either transportation needs or capital improvement needs from the caucus and the citizens. And I think the West of Maroon Plan is a really good example of something that identified specific projects that those people wanted to see and gave us a very clear action item and a very clear pathway forward. And to take that and then do a public process forward after this is already identified gives us a real step forward in planning and doing the public process. And it gives you a little bit of an idea of there's a real want there for it from the constituency.
That's a positive, yeah.
And that's how Open Space and Trails also coordinates. It's kind of a three-way triangle of, say, caucus says, oh, we need to widen for bikes in a certain area. Well, it's GR's right away, it's maybe some Open Space and Trails funding, it's all of that pulling it together. So,
Well, thank you very much
That's
for
great.
that integration, Michael. And then there's one last thing I want to bring it back to before we run out of time, and that is the turnaround time on building permits, and what are you looking at in the future, and kind of what is the standard that the board would like to support? Michael?
Gio, one of the first things I think you were involved in Woody Creek at least, was the sort of three-way, I don't know what to call it.
We call it the reverse traffic triangle.
Yeah. And, but I don't think that was mentioned in the new Woody Creek master plan, but that certainly is something that seems to me that. It was?
I think it was, actually. We did a review of all of, before we started, we said, GR, tell us what all your hot issues are in Woody Creek, or in da-da-da. So we have a list of all those things, and when we passed it on to the caucus groups. So I think they looked at it.
Okay, but I didn't see it, but it seems to me with what's happening now at that particular intersection is there's much more traffic because people are trying to bypass the bottleneck coming into Aspen, and they turn on to McLean Flats Road.
Sure.
I think we need a count there for one thing, and because it seems to be in the hundreds. But that means that traffic is really intense at that three-way intersection. And
Where are we talking? Lower River, Upper River, and
we're
the
talking
bridge?
Smith Hill
Okay.
to W/J
Trying to
Hill
think
to Upper River Road.
That's where I
And-
pictured it.
And it's
It's funky.
It's
scary.
some yield, some stop, some don't look, some look, some can't look. It's a very difficult, but there was a very good plan, at least for the bridge there, and the intersection itself was left to the future, but I don't think that should drop off the Woody Creek caucus, at least to say, and that was a valuable addition to the planning process for these caucus areas.
Okay. Thank you for that comment, Michael.
Permit time.
Yeah, permit turnaround time. Where are we at with that?
Brian, you want to talk about where we are right now, or where we were in the
Sure.
middle of the crazy?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to share that too.
Yeah. It fluctuates.
So I would say, I haven't done a recent check, but just kind of a good average for right now is about 8 to 10 weeks. But we peaked at probably about 14 to 16 weeks at the middle of summer when it was really busy.
Last summer.
The
This
2015 past summer. Yeah, and that carried through probably not just in the summertime, all the way through until August, September. We didn't really slow down and get back to a kind of a decent turnaround time until later on. And one of the reasons, when we first brought Jan on as a second plans examiner, we actually got down to the 4 to 6 week target area that we were hoping to achieve by bringing on that second person. But we quickly got so busy on the field with 3 big years of projects that we have about 1,000 active projects right now going on throughout the county for inspections. I had to pull Jan out of plans and back out in the field, so we went back to just one plans examiner. So that was one of the reasons why we bring forward a second inspector, because the turnaround times was really our focus, was to get to that 4 to 6 weeks, and we achieved it with 2 people full time. But
George?
Can I tag on to that?
Please.
So when you say 4 to 6 weeks, Brian, you have a system, a color-coded system that allows simpler projects to move ahead of others. So if someone just wants to add a garage or whatever. So when you say 4 to 6 weeks, is that an average, or is that, how do you compartmentalize those?
that's our
by
goal
the
for the
different
blacks.
codes?
Sorry.
For the black.
Yeah, that's our goal for the blacks,
tough-
for the most complicated.
For the tough ones.
And so for the simpler ones, you see a turnaround time of?
You know, Tony does a real good job of kind of prioritizing the change orders on active permits. If a job's going to get held up by a change order, he kind of shuffles those in between the larger projects. So we never went below probably 2 to 3 week turnaround on the blues, the less complicated
Greens.
projects, and the greens.
Greens we do. over
Greens
the
we're
county.
doing in a couple of days. A week at the max is our goal for greens, and that's kind of where we've always maintained, even in peak times, just because they become priority when a job's actively out there. And we maybe initiated that change order because we went out and found something that was not according to the approved plans. And we want them to have that change order back on site before we do the next inspection. We try to rush those back out so we don't hold up their timeline too much. So that 4 to 6 week goal is for the blacks, for the most complex plans. And the only reason we keep it at that 4 to 6 week is because due to some of the constraints on planning and zoning plan review time, we think that's a realistic goal. It would probably take an additional planning and zoning person if we wanted to get to a tighter turnaround than that 4 to 6 weeks.
More
Yeah.
engineering.
And engineering, true.
Yeah. I actually thought I heard you say 2 different numbers. You said we're averaging about 8 to 10 weeks now,
Yes.
and then the goal is 4 to 6 weeks average. So I guess we're not hitting the mark now, and we're just heading into the busy season.
Yes.
What type of additional resources do we need to put towards this to make sure we maintain
point.
that 4 to 6 week average?
Well, when we come back to you in March, in that work session, when we talk about the cost study, that's when we want to kind of nail down some, we think we have a really good handle on what it takes to do the 4 to 6 weeks. Now, you may say, if I come in and say, it's going to take me 5 more inspectors to do that, you may say, well, maybe 8 weeks is good enough. You know, I don't know, but we're going to give you that range so you can decide where you think the best public service is, you know, given the cost of having the folks on staff versus the turnaround time. Because what happens is we don't really have control over what comes in and when it comes
That's right.
in. So we don't want to spike and drop and spike and drop and hire people and fire people and
Yeah,
make that
yeah.
happen. We're trying to find that sweet spot where we can deliver on a pretty regular basis a service level that you're proud of, you know, as a county, you know, as county commissioners, and that we're proud of in terms of doing the work and getting people out there. So we have seen the range from, you know, the crazy, crazy summer that we had, 14 to 16 week turnaround on the really hard ones, to now, which is theoretically our slower time, you know, 8 to 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we've seen, we're back to that 2007 level, beyond actually. We're beyond 2007 levels.
I mean, that's my concern, and I appreciate we're going to be talking about it further in March. But between our decision and then advertising and interviewing and getting them familiar with our codes and online, I think we're going to be behind the 8 ball all year. And, you know, we're not looking at a sheet that talks about the fees and the hours and things like that. But I know it has a cost that to the consumer, and, you know, I would be disappointed if I was paying that same fixed cost, but then not getting the product for 14 weeks. Whereas, you know, you pay that fixed cost in a slow time and you get it in 5 weeks, you know, and it seems like you should get a discount if it takes that long or something, and it's delaying people's ability to work. It changes market conditions, it changes price of materials and bank loans and construction loans and everything. So I just know I've been in the situation when things are ramping up more in the city, and you get to a point where you're so far behind you can't catch up, and the public's disappointed, individuals are disappointed, and so I'm just not sure that you know waiting that long makes sense, or whether you could start advertising now and be able to know that you have people on board. I just want to bring this to the board's attention because if last summer we got down to 14 and 16 weeks, it's hard to imagine we won't be at that same place this summer.
And last summer, I put it in a contingency amount of money for hiring consultant or contract people, and they couldn't provide anybody. I actually was planning on using somebody, and I told you hire somebody, and we've got the budget to have you bring somebody out here, and they couldn't provide somebody. So that's how busy the rest of the market is too.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Board, is anyone else, Michael?
Yeah, the other side to that, though, is that as long as the people who submit those applications know there's a waiting period,
Yes.
if they submit those applications within a time frame that's realistic, it's, you know, I mean, we all want instant gratification, but on large projects, there can be a good amount of planning going on the side of the applicant with the knowledge that there's a 10-week or more waiting period. And if they submit it in that time, with that time frame in mind, then their project can proceed on their planning schedule. So it's a balance between the efficiency of your department and the efficiency of the applicants who can expect that amount of time. When I sit down at a table in a restaurant, I often do expect to wait a little bit before, at least to look at the menu, to think, and to get my order. It's not 10 weeks, but it's a certain amount of time. So the applicants can expect that too.
And we do post that. The front desk has those numbers, and I keep them updated on as that improves or it expands. I post that up front so that that's available, and we tell them. The trouble is about 40% of our phone calls are still, where's my permit? Where's it at? Or we've hit that 14 weeks, we told them, but we're still not done with their permit. And then they really start calling, and my plans examiner is answering the phone all day and not reviewing plans because people are calling saying, where am I?
Well, and that's a part of further technology sophistication where you can tell the progress of the plan by simply clicking on your plan, seeing it's at 95%. And whatever time is later. So I think that's doable. But and when those projects come to you, they've already been 2 years in the planning.
Oh, yeah.
So
They're ready.
So 10 weeks, 10 weeks added to that is, you know, they need to make that room for that. So.
Well, those are the policy decisions, you know, because I can see where the board could feel in between that somehow, you know.
Well, Michael has expressed his support or position. I'm not going to try to restate that. How do others feel about this turnaround time? And is it important to take more action sooner or wait till March and these guys can be on hold about whether they hire some additional help or not for this season?
I guess I'm a little confused. We've got a budgeted position from the 2016 budget or no?
It's a pending, actually.
Pending, yeah, that wasn't.
We were going to look at it again if demand required.
Yeah. And so that's something that we bring back to you, George. We did have positions in for community development, for front desk, and
Which we did.
yeah, so we addressed some of we prioritized where we thought the greatest pinch points were in the process, work through those, kind of see what happens with workload, as well as the fee discussion that we've been promising to bring back to you. We do have a suggestion that's going to be a pretty potentially significant restructuring of how we do the fees, and wanted to bring that all together for you. So I think the question on the table right now is, do you want us to build that whole package, or come back to you incrementally because of the urgency of the service level demand is kind of the discussion that's happening now. I think our recommendation has been, let us bring a package back to you, because we keep coming back incrementally and making adjustments, and that'd be better. to bring
Yeah,
back.
I mean, I'd like to see sort of a bigger picture instead of just trying to piecemeal this together and not having clarification.
Okay, that's George. Wait in,
Yeah,
Patty, and then we'll come back to you, Michael.
You know, I think you've got 3 pending positions in that department. If you got a front desk, you got enforcement, and you have a new planning person, or plans review, or inspector, or whatever. I think you guys need to discuss it and bring it back. Which direction would you like us to support you going? Because you guys are the ones that are, the boots on the ground there, and you know what you see on a day-to-day and what's of most benefits you. And hiring 3 at one time, was the chaos involved in that, or how do you want to space it out and then bring it back and give us your evaluation of which direction you guys want to go?
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, in terms of fee schedule, I'd like to see sort of based on a professional equivalency kind of fee schedule, not based on, well, we have to subsidize this part of our, our food inspections or something. Because I think you need to, because I'd be willing to subsidize the parts that you can't make up. But in terms of fee schedules, an explanation to a client, which is, listen, this is the going rate for this kind of professional service. And in the free market, and this is what we charge here, because we're professionals. That's where I'd like to see the fee structure.
We have some of that standards, what other communities charge and why, and we are well below what other communities charge.
Well, I'm not worried about the communities as much as the professionalism of the person who's doing the job.
Who's doing the work.
And if you were to hire that person from, an equivalent person from the private sector, what were they getting paid?
Don't
That's
say
what-
that, because everybody will leave. Don't say, Michael, I don't.
That's a fee structure, that's not what they should expect.
So, but I did like something I heard here, if it would be possible, I'll just throw this out here. Would it be possible, because I think Rachel's right, we're gonna be behind the 8 ball on the building plans examiner. I'm wondering if there's any way we could go ahead and advertise prior to the work session in hopes of hearing from the board that we can have that position, because it will take, from our experiences, months to hire, to get someone to be able to live in the community, if they don't already live here, that sort of thing. So I'm wondering if that's a compromise here. Should we?
If I can weigh in, today's newspaper, Denver Post, reported that the unemployment rate in Colorado dropped to 3.7%. That is an incredibly tight labor market. It's generally considered that somewhere between 3 and 5% of people really cannot work because of other disabilities. So you've really pretty much hit full employment here. And I just have experience. I've seen this back up so badly, not with the county, but with other systems where, if you're told you're going to start a job on August 1st and then your contractor calls you and says, no, you're not really starting until September 1st, that's a hardship on people. And, it's just kind of like waiting online, and it says, oh, your wait time's 10 minutes, and then it flashes a few minutes later, no, now it's gone up to 35. And you're like, what happened? I was in line, And I just don't want to be that far behind the 8 ball, and I think that I can see it coming very clearly if we're not almost halfway behind the curve now. To hear that our goal is 4 to 6, but it's currently 8 to 10, and we'll wait, because also a separate fear is just process. That fee structure work session in March could come back to us, and we could send it back to you for further work, and you won't get back in front of us for another month, and then it won't be passed, and then and then it's June, and so this has got more urgency from me, I think, than So at least seeing what's on the market and things like that.
What I would suggest the board do is if you set your expectations that, hey, you need to be prepared to meet this outcome, whether it be 4 to 6 or, if 8 to 10 is fine, let us know now. But if you want us to really be prepared for the 4 to 6, let us go back and do the problem solving on it and come back with a proposal. Because I do think part of our discussion in making that plans examiner pending was these other positions are going to have an impact on the workflow, and we wanted to see how that impacted the workflow and make sure we were addressing the right need. And I think we're still in that process, but what's really helpful to understand from you guys is what are the expectations that you really want us to be meeting and aiming for, and we can come back with some solutions along those lines.
Michael, what is the weeks that we'd like?
Well, that's not what I want to address. The question I want to ask is, if your plans are being submitted digitally,
Not yet.
Not yet.
but at some point they will be, then it seems to me that having a location for a building inspector is much less important. That you simply
They have a car.
Well, you simply send those digital
laptop.
information to a specialist who can deal with the IBC, right? I mean, there might be.
You mean an off-site?
Yeah,
Review.
this is even if they can't do it 100% to Pitkin County code, the vast majority of it is still IBC. So those things are going to be changing, and it's not going to. That's what you're implying by digital access to information.
The issue with using a contract plans examiner is we give them 40 to 60% of the permit fees to do that work for us. So then our budget gets affected by farming that money out.
Those adjustments, what we're talking about now is time. So time obviously equals money.
Right. And the other part of that too, from what I hear, is that, we have a certain standard, and I'm really proud of these guys for that standard. And we don't just let anybody review our plans just because they're a breathing body with some credentials. We really are picky about that, and we'll take our time to do it right if we need to. And so we've found that there's a lack of people that we can hire to do contract work like that we really think is going to do the same quality.
I'm looking in the future, and I expect the
Yep.
quality to be the same, and I don't think
Right.
that there's any
Right.
implication that I would want less
No.
quality.
Okay, well, we're starting to run over time. We have another item coming up, but I would like to get back to the general question that was on the table. We're currently seeing term times around 8 to 10 weeks. We've had peaks as bad as 14 to 16 weeks last summer, and our goal is that we have it more 4 to 6 weeks. Does the board would like to see us move more towards that goal of 4 to 6 weeks? Or I would say in the alternate that we'd be okay with 8 to 10 weeks as long as we don't slip beyond 8 to 10 weeks. Which of those two customer service levels will we
I'd
like?
like to see the 4 to 6. We're going to have occasions where we bump into the latter. And I think John Peacock is right. We need to have you bring us back this
To work towards.
Larger package.
Yeah. And then we can make a concrete decision. But I think we need to do it sooner than later because of the time frame.
Michael?
I'm not going to be tied to a specific time frame.
Okay.
I mean, if your emphasis is quality, do the best quality work in whatever time frame you can do. And it's going to vary. Sometimes I wait in line to ski, sometimes I don't.
But if we had more people, we could pretty much say.
Well, if we all had our own ski lists, we wouldn't have to wait.
Yeah. Okay, George, what's your preference?
Do that because your feet.
Yeah, I need to have a bigger picture because, we're looking at one person, we're looking at two, where are we going to place these people? I mean, you can't have a professional working out of a closet, expect them to do quality work.
You'd be surprised how long you
It's-
can
it's-
Depends on what you call the closet.
Jan and Mike love their closets.
Yeah, Suzanne's great in her closet.
Sorry, George.
But anyway, so I'm having a hard time without this information, but I would certainly defer to staff
and take recommendations from staff in terms of timing and needs, as long as we sort of see the bigger picture, where you're going to put them and how it's going to play out in terms of the overall budget and things like that.
Yeah, and I think next time we discuss it, I'd like to see the fees that people pay, and what are they getting back in terms of timeliness for the fees that they're paying. Because again, we don't discount them when we slow down, and sometimes when your restaurant meal comes out too slow, they comp it for you. So let's keep this.
I don't want to go there.
Don't want to go there.
Yeah, no. Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very informative, and if we have afterthoughts, we can discuss them at a future open session or something.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. There we go. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break so you can set up and we can use the restroom. It's going to be an hour-long discussion. Thank you.
What's the name? You can call him.
Sleeves and figure them out.
Okay, Grassroots TV, are we on? Thank you, everybody. We are returning to the work session of Tuesday, January 26th. This is Board of County Commissioners meeting, and we are now going to have a discussion and review of potential upcoming ballot questions with Dale Will, our Director of Open Space and Trails Program. And I want to frame this by saying that this is a dialogue prior to the Open Space and Trail Board retreat. It is not a decision point for our board. So we're not going to be asked to vote on something. We're not going to take those sort of positions, but we're going to give you our input and our thoughts.
Right.
Thank you, Dale.
Thanks, Rachel, and I appreciate having some agenda time to talk about this. I also appreciate the fact that we've got 4 of our Open Space Board trustees here. We didn't plan it that way, but it shows the amount of interest that we have in this discussion, which is good. As I tried to describe in the memo that we provided for the discussion today, Open Space and Trails has been authorized now a few times for finite periods of time, and we're in the third era of open space right now that will sunset in 2020. Last time around, we ended up going back for reauthorization 4 years early for a number of different reasons, but one of them was that the county was anticipating a question in 2008 and really didn't want to have a crowded ballot for that question, and we were invited to go early, and that's how that came about. We have something somewhat similar going on now where there's another county fund that will sunset, and after our discussion last week, the upshot was that fund, the Healthy Communities Fund, is really wanting to do that in 2018 and is hoping to, again, not have a crowded ballot for that purpose. As far as the issues specific to open space and trails go, there's been a fair amount of discussion about the current limits that are set up in the county charter regarding the 3 different purposes for our fund. One of those being the acquisition and improvement of open space, second being the acquisition and improvement of trails properties, and the third being the maintenance of all the above, including properties that are assigned to the open space department that have been acquired by the county at different times through different mechanisms. And we've really pushed right up against the ceiling of what we can do with our maintenance account. We do have a budget and a 5-year plan that would enable us to sustain our operations through the current 2020 sunset with that 15%. However, there's not room in that 15% for very much additional innovation or growth in the sort of programs that the public have been increasingly interested in over time. I think it's fair to say that we have a different open space program today than we envisioned even in 2006. And a lot of that is the number of activities and the amount of public involvement in the actual stewardship of the program, which has been something I give Gary Tenenbaum a lot of credit for. I'm here with Gary Tenenbaum as the Assistant Director for Open Space and Trails. So we've got programs that are pretty much filling up what we can do with our maintenance fund, and at the same time we continually asked or it's suggested to us that there are other things going on in the county that we might want to be more active in addressing, and I outlined some of those in the discussion memo, but on that list, and I'm sure there's other things, but on that list are can we rehabilitate historic structures that are on open space properties, and the most glaring example we have right now is Frida Glacier's old house, which we're not currently set up to do much with it, and for that to be repurposed and usable, it really would need some investment. By way of comparison, Boulder Open Space had a similar issue, and they addressed it at the polls, and they now have the authority to protect historic resources that are in the context of an open space property. So that's one example. Another one is the county trailheads that are not associated with open space. And we have those in Lanedo, we have them in Castle Creek, we have one at the Independence Pass Gate, we have one on Prince Creek Road. So those are places where there's probably a need for some recreation management that's currently in a no man's land administratively. And open space is looked at as having become a fairly effective recreation manager for some of these open space assets. Do we want to expand our charter scope to be able to address those issues? I'm not saying that we do or we don't, but those are the kinds of things that we could look at doing in a ballot question this fall. In order to analyze whether we want to even propose them, the Open Space Board and staff need some time and need to dedicate some resources to analyzing some of those things specifically, and consequently we've been looking at a retreat the first week of April where we can do the analysis of cost and benefit and look at other charter limitations that may or may not be appropriate, and look at that in an all-day retreat and come back with some recommendations. We don't want to put the effort into that if there's no way we're moving forward this year. We'll wait until we're closer to a date when we can have a more timely discussion. However, the sense I've gotten is that no one has yet seen a reason we shouldn't go next fall, and really all we're looking for today is a sort of an interim understanding that it's a good time for us to dedicate our staff resources and board resources to developing the best possible set of recommendations around some of these questions. In addition, of course, there's a duration of the authorization as well as the allocations among the three pots that we would want to look at. And there's been a lot of suggestions of what we should do, but today I'm really just looking for a green light on us spending some time and energy to more fully develop proposals that we could bring back to you in the anticipation that, absent some fatal flaws, we're on kind of a trajectory towards going back to the polls in the fall. And I would maybe, before the board takes this up, ask if I've forgotten anything or if there's anything else to add to this discussion. I'm joined here today also by Hawk Greenway, trustee for Open Space and Trails, Tim McFlynn, trustee for Open Space and Trails, Howie Mallory, board chair of Open Space and Trails, and Graham Means as trustee.
Okay. Thank you all for attending today, and I would ask at this time if you had any additional things you want us to be contemplating in our discussion. Tim, and then Hawk, and then we'll bring it back into the board.
Just very briefly, and thanks for taking time with us today, and we must not have had a better thing to do with our lunch hour, but we're all here
It's
almost.
so pretty outside.
The two little points that I would add to Dale's presentation that come up more and more as 25 years have gone by is not only the length of a renewal, whether it comes to the voters in 2016 or 18 or 20, but at what point, and this was discussed earlier today, is the stewardship, the responsibility to take care of all these assets, not something that sunsets. I mean, that's a question that we had in '06. It's a question we'll have in '16 if that's the date you pick, but it's just an additional question. And the other one, I suppose, which we'll visit about on our retreat, is we've done 10-year, in 1990 when we started, it went till 2000, but we renewed early. Then it went to 2010, and we renewed early. And do you want to do anything, given the enormous popularity that you all hear about, and we do too, of having this array of assets? Do you want to go longer than 10 years? I mean, those are all questions we're going to visit about, but, and I think have consensus recommendations that you can listen to, but we'll be ready. My main message is, we'll be ready, that we as the broad we will get a bunch of citizens involved. Won't just be us, won't just be staff, it really has to be the whole community, volunteer citizens, as it has been. How many times have we done this? 5?
3.
6?
Well, 3 authorizations and a couple of charter tweaks.
Yeah, we've had 5 at least elections, but we'll be ready.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Hawk?
I think that between Dale and Tim, they pretty well covered everything there. I think, I just want to say that 4 years before the authorization ceases, we're on track. This is a good time to be discussing it. This is not a crisis. You know, we can continue and maintain and through basically belt tightening on the stewardship side of things and continuing to defer historic structure, any changes there, unless it's to simply turn those over to another entity somehow. But it feels like it's the right time to discuss this because it is not a crisis.
Great, thank you. Howie?
I think I appreciate you letting us have this sort of initial dialogue. A couple of comments. We're very cautious and mindful of the danger of scope creep that can happen in any department, any organization. But having said that, we're getting a sense that we are being asked to do more and more on our recreational, our wildlife, our stewardship infrastructure demands. So we really want to be able to talk about it in a thoughtful way at our retreat coming up in about 6 weeks. So we can come up with not a rubber stamp, just rubber stamp continuation of what we've done in the past, but we see our programming and overall community expectations changing over the last 25 years, as Tim said. We bought a lot of land over the last 25 years now, but really in the management of it, it's a much bigger job than we ever anticipated. So this is a very opportune time to bring it up at our retreat.
Thank you. Okay, and we'll check back around later. We have 1 hour for this discussion. George, you have your hand up?
So in general, I'm supportive of exploring going forward in 2016. I think there's several questions that we talked about last week that I'm sure you'll be discussing in terms of length of time, how you want to look at your percentages of your mix. What strikes me is that we've acquired over 25 years, I don't know, thousands of acres of land and miles and miles of trails. And we've undertaken, in the last few years, the entire Nordic program, winter program, which was new, which has added a big chunk of, not staff time, because the city handles that, but certainly budgetary. So we've acquired all these assets. And I think we need to really think seriously about being able to be stewards of these lands permanently. You know, if we look at the budget of the Forest Service and how they have been not only limited in terms of their ability to maintain and protect the forest, but actually have pressures on their budget from other departments, and gradually they're just losing dollars in their ability to, and we see this locally in terms of maintaining the campgrounds and being able to provide assistance and information and being able to maintain and upgrade the trails. They're not able to do that because even though they have a budget, that budget keeps on getting tapped out by other needs on a federal level. And I think we need to think about, as we've acquired all these assets, being able to be good stewards for future generations. And that's going to require, I think, thinking about a permanency. Certainly a permanency for being able just to maintain what we currently have, but also perhaps a permanency in terms of being able to ensure that this program goes on. So that's something I think that would be a good discussion for you as a board to have.
Thank you. Patty was next?
Yeah, well, that was going to be one of my points. I agree with George, because if we don't have a funding source to maintain these properties, what are we to do? What are we to do to improve them? What are we to do just to basically fundamentally maintain them in the future without some kind of specific funding source? So I think that definitely needs the permanence of the maintenance portion. My question would be, could you have in the same ballot question a permanence for maintenance and a sunset for purchase? You have it in the same question.
You know,
that's a technical.
That's great. I have that written down on my list so far, and that is the legals, because we're going to have to look through the legality of different permutations.
So I want to throw that out as part of, because I think that would be a benefit if we could do that. As far as historic buildings, I think it would be great to have a funding mechanism from that through open space for properties, buildings, structures that are on open space. And I think sooner the better, because you know there's the old saying of demolition by neglect. So the longer we wait to restore them, the more funds and more time and energy it will be. And that would also perhaps offer us the opportunity to search out grants, because we'd have matching funds for some grant opportunities or for special projects. Who knows what creativity we could have to restore some of these really unique buildings we're finding on open space parcels. And recreation management, yes, it's a definite, because we're already hearing concerns about overuse, about, preference to one form of recreation versus another. So I think we need to really be able to have the funds to really focus on that. And you're right, we are being asked to do special things on open space properties, such as perhaps taking over the management up at North Star at the Forest Service for the put-in. That's something else we never really thought about in the past. We're going to have more of those parking issues. We're seeing more come up along trailheads that are shared by different entities, but where open space is involved in those. So I think we need to have that as part of the discussion too. What else could be coming up in the future that we didn't anticipate coming up in the past? So I think that's going to be key. I'm really glad you guys are doing this, and I think I look forward to helping create that local community effort, because as you know, ballot questions cannot be supported by staff once the ballot language is approved and moving forward. So we will need to reach out, and I think we have a huge community that has done well in the past,
And I think we can rally that support again in the future, and I think it'll be fun.
Fun.
It's fun.
We like fun.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I think the public looks on open space and trails as really our premier department in the county. Because most people have an interface, whether it's just walking downtown on the Rio Grande, or whether it's traveling through multiple counties on the Rio Grande. So it's an extraordinary thing. And so I would be in favor of looking at the issue for this upcoming year. I also think that the idea of dividing up the expenditures, that was a good idea to introduce the subject of open space to the county. And these are how those expenditures. But you've proven that you can spend money wisely, either on acquisition or maintenance. And so I think that could be removed and people would be perfectly comfortable with that. In terms of limiting the time, I think that was also an introduction to open space. And I think people can't imagine this county without its open space assets either expanding or at least being maintained. So I think the time limit is past its necessary proof period. So I would, but I'm not tied to any of it, quite frankly. I mean, you guys decide, but that's the way that's the way I feel about it. It's a good program. The one thing people are going to ask, well, if we take off these limits on your spending or time, well, how do we know you're not just going to accumulate a ton of money? So you're going to have some aspect of a ratchet down if necessary. If, for instance, you have acquired all open space property in the county that's possible to accumulate, we might not need that kind of acquisition fund any longer. How do we ratchet that back? I think that's going to be a question for people. Because if you look at your tax bill, you're really a substantial, big part of it. I think it's around 10%.
Just came out in the mail today.
So, so that's a big responsibility.
Let's see, I have a number of thoughts on this, and similar to my colleagues here. I'll try to frame them well. First off, I think that the goal would be to develop good questions for polling of the public. We're all dealing with anecdotal knowledge, and all of our friends love open space and use open space, but how well are we connected with the rest of the population, and perhaps folks who really aren't getting out there or still struggling economically? And so we did poll on the Healthy Community Fund. I think that's been time tested too, but yet there was tremendous resistance to making it a permanent fund. We really couldn't even get people to say, how about 20-year reauthorization, 10 years, started losing support, and we went down to 8. And I can guarantee you all those providers and folks who volunteered and did door-to-door work would have much preferred that we do something longer than just 8 years. So I need to hear back from good polling results. So to my mind, this is about developing the right questions to ask to get the right information from a polling exercise before it goes forward. On duration, I would think a little more towards 20 years than permanent, but I would be open to the polling data too. And I've thought about a kind of a different variation on this, is that perhaps you go forward with one question with the new concepts and proposals as needed and the mill levy amount. And after that passes and you've moved forward a few years, you could go back with a question to make a portion of that the permanent maintenance fund. And so the rest would expire, but the permanent maintenance fund would go forward. It wouldn't be a new tax. It would be a way of legislating how that changes. But that might avoid some confusion. I think I would be concerned about 2 questions, and that's what I'm thinking about. Does it have to be 2 questions? If you break one into permanent and one into an acquisition fund, that would eventually, and so you run the risk of people saying, well, yeah, let's maintain what we got, but I think they already have enough, or they already have enough maintenance, so let's just keep buying more land. And so it may make sense to put the question forward and then see what percentage should go forward as a permanent fund for maintenance. And that's been part of the dilemma, is of understanding, well, how much of a permanent fund do we need? And so that may or may not be fully answered by this November, but it could be after a few more years of experience. The one thing I've thought about as you talk about the growing needs and the changing role, and it's happened a little by default, but I think our Open Space and Trails Board and Department can and should have a role for advocacy as well. And I've depended on Dale at different times to give me some bullet points on advocating for the reauthorization of Land and Water Conservation Fund. Last year, it was Summit County who spent a lot of money defeating a legislative proposal to make eminent domain forbidden for open space recreation purposes. And then, of course, there's that larger federal transfer of public lands to the states issue, which is not going to go away. And so, I don't know what that is, but you are our voice. And when we've invested so many public dollars in trailheads to public lands, to then lose that public lands behind them, that's something we should advocate on. So I see there's, kind of a growing role or potential of weighing in there. The allocations are the tricky part. It was very interesting that they were ranges before, and so they added up to more than 100%. You can do this much range here and this much range here, and you guys have. Well, they didn't add up to more than 100%, but they were ranges. They weren't,
That was to give it flexibility, but it couldn't be more than 100.
Yeah, and and certainly on the spending.
We had to. Right now, we've clamped down on the Trails Fund in order to fund maintenance up to its maximum.
Yeah, and so I don't know if ranges matter if you start to make them so broad, in the future, and so that starts to get kind of silly. The goal would be to keep the language simple, but it's always a challenge. We all know that. But I look at this, and I think others would as well, that the last iteration of the open space tax included the ability to purchase water rights. And that was new, and it was discovered that, and this was of course before the Healthy Rivers and Stream Fund, but it does allow the Open Space Fund to partner better and really initially kicked off some of the work. So to look for some changes that would allow for the rehabilitation of historic structures, I'd like to see that. I think it's, again, how that language plays to the public via the polling, that they don't think you're creating a whole new department and program, and that it's somehow modified and clarified. It would be helpful going forward as you do this for public information later to really talk among yourselves about what are the core functions that are the single most important. And those core functions are growing and changing because the recreation management is becoming a larger issue. And how do you talk about that so it doesn't sound like we're becoming oppressive or authoritarian? But we don't want conflicts on the trails to come to blows, or parking at trail heads and these sort of things. So I really think that we need to talk about our core functions and then talk about our adjunct functions and how they all integrate. Because it's one thing to say we support open space and trails and it's a great thing. It's another thing for someone to be able to say that was the elk calving area and that would have been home sites. This would have been a blockade to fish passage or to your access to be able to use the river. And so I think it's about integrating that big shiny thing we love, open space, into things that people can relate to on the ground, that this happened in my neighborhood because of this is there, or I'd like to see this happen in my neighborhood because the funds are still there. So detailing how it's good for the herds and how it's good for the environment, and how this investment that we've made over all these years has resulted in these beneficial goods. Because otherwise, there's so many new people in the community, they kind of take it for granted. And there's one open space and trail sign maybe at one access point, but you look at it from 3 other angles and you say, how come that piece of land hasn't been developed yet? I guess somebody's just sitting on it. You don't realize it's out of the pool now because of the community's investment. So I think really getting back to that, let's see,
Rachel, if I could just jump on that, at the celebration we had last
Yeah.
fall, we put out a lot of promo materials for that celebration, and we're continuing to have people say, I had no idea that that's there because of you guys.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't realized quite how big of a gap there is in terms of what people see every day and what they associate with open space.
Yeah. One other question which I don't think you have on your list is debrucing or not debrucing. I mean, if it's a new question and it's renewing it, we saw when it was debruced and rose very high, and then you guys ratcheted it back to not collect the full amount you were able. I don't know what will sell best with the public. It's hard to predict where you're going to be in 2016 or what sort of property bill people are going to be protesting and how the sentiment is, but I would take a careful look at the pros and cons of debrucing or not debrucing that question. It's my pretty strong impression that we're probably going to see a 0.75 sales tax on the statewide ballot for transportation funding, coming from my Club 20 meetings in Denver just last week. The contractors associations are planning on doing a petition drive if they can't get it as a referred measure from the legislature. They've been hiring polling. They polled again in December, and gasoline tax, no matter how low the price of gasoline is, it seems very, very uncomfortable to people. It polls extremely low. I am not an advocate of sales tax for a variety of reasons, but it just seems like that momentum's going forward. So that's at least one other issue I think you'll face on the ballot. And then the school district, of course, is looking to Aspen, at least, if not the county as a whole, for sales tax for this year as well. So those are the two items I know that may be on a larger statewide ballot. And not that, luckily, this is a mill levy, not a sales tax, but it always adds up in people's minds how many yeses you put on a ballot. So those are my key points. The last one is I think that you might have to get a little bit into the details. If we're restoring historic structures, how can they be utilized or not? Could it become housing for 2 rangers who work in the department, or would that be not allowed? Can no one live on open space property? Could it be storage, or how it can be utilized? So I think that would be something you might need to answer in there. But those are my major thoughts. I'll turn it back to the board for any other things that sparked. Michael and then George.
One thing that occurred to me is there's a coordination between open space and trails and roads. Because it seems to me that, if you were to use, for instance, you have the narrow part of the shale bluffs. That's never going to get larger except you examined it somewhat at a really high expense. However, an alternate trail that would follow McLean Flats Road and go into town would offer an alternate use for people. So that's something I think you need to look at in the ballot question and see how you would arrange that as a possibility. And I think a lot of our roads are used as certainly bike trails, and they might be advantageous to increase the size of that bike trail and have road open space participate in that. I don't know, that's something
Well,
I
you
think.
came up with-
Definitely,
Yeah.
because we were interested in adding a bike lane to Castle Creek Road when they were repaving, and we were informed by the attorney's office, we just couldn't even talk about it, so, with the existing charter.
George?
I just to clarify for the public and the press, what we're discussing here is the possibility of going before the voters for reauthorization of the current mill levy to address some of these long-range issues. But we're not looking at increasing the mill levy. I'm saying not ahead by the trustees.
And that has been the discussion, although I would add that may be a subject that would be interesting to do some polling on. I don't know, that would be up to the decision makers on that. But certainly the impetus for us to come forward is not we're looking for an increase.
It'd be great if you could even find a small fraction of a decrease and be able to go out to campaign on it's going down. I see if the board doesn't mind, we'll take a little more comment from our open space hawk and then Graham.
I had a question for you, Rachel, for the board on, you started your comments with polling, and recently we had Trust for Public Land, and I believe that was at our joint meeting, and I thought they had a very impressive presentation, which included a huge, almost a package deal of polling, and I was curious as to how the board felt about working with an organization like Trust for Public Land.
I found that presentation a little awkward because and I realized it wasn't the intent, but it sounded like an outside group was going to come in and to run a local election. What I understand is that their work is primarily volunteer because that is their public nonprofit mission.
They're foundation funded on that function.
On that element. So I guess I don't really have a hard and fast about who has to do the polling. At some levels, I would like to ask our management because of, maybe not today, but in general to evaluate the question. Because we've worked with some of the same people in the past, and so we can compare the results from previous years. And, you know, there's something to be said for a little bit of consistency there. And so we've used that sort of analysis, I think, for the Healthy Rivers and Streams and even the mill levy for roads, which failed, unfortunately, but that had other problems, and the renewal of the Healthy Community Fund. So I'm not sure which or why. I'm not opposed to it in the classic sense. I think it's great that they help communities that don't have an open space program at all, getting it off the feet for the first ground time, you know, things like that. But it's always been so locally driven here and originated here. So, George, did you want to add in on that?
I mean, just for my comment is, I would consider utilizing them as a resource. Use their expertise to actually just go through some of these questions that we posed today, based on their experience, and use them as a resource, and which is what they are. So I certainly would not discount them.
The thing they bring to the table is they're very familiar with every single local government open space tax in the entire nation. And to the extent we may have not thought of something, that's exactly the way I look at them, is that they're the generalists in this field, and we're much more knowledgeable about our local needs. So.
Thank you. Graham?
I had that same question about PDL, but but I would think they would bring the generalist view, the broad, you know, I would think those would be extremely helpful, and if we didn't want them to do polling or something, we could adjust, you know, for that. And then the only other comment, I guess we'd be interested in any sort of more purely political reasons, whether to go or not, when to go, and, you know, things that we may not be that politically aware about, competing issues on the ballot, and timing, and political mood, and, you know, I guess we could get some input from you on those issues.
The only other district that I've heard is considering going before a mill levy is the Basalt Regional Library. So they're in discussion right now because they've got some needs. That would be an increase in their mill levy, of course, as I just saw a nod of heads. At this point, you're not looking at an increase in mill levy at all, just maintaining the current. So, but that's the only other local district that I've heard recently.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add on, since George is looking over here, I do know the school district renewal discussions have started back up, as Rachel had already mentioned. I do believe the school district is going to be approaching snowmass on that, and I don't think it's been resolved, you know, what the source of that funding might be if snowmass does support a tax question, whether it would be a sales tax, property tax, or something else, particularly because of the sensitivity snowmass has had to getting over that 10%. So there may be some other discussion there that still happens.
Can I just ask, how much of the Basalt Regional District encompasses Pitkin County?
Well, it's from Old Snowmass.
So it's that far up? I just wasn't sure where that boundary started.
Oh, you mean the ring?
Yeah, how far up the boundary comes into Pitkin County for
Certainly
the...
not the municipalities, and not out to Redstone, but frying pan, the greater Basalt, Old Snowmass area.
It's larger than I remembered.
Are you finished, George?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Howie?
Michael brought up an interesting point about roads and road bridges. Public sees any paved surface as basically a continuation of whether it's a trail or a road, some functionality. Maybe it's just an information question in this discussion. Is Road and Bridge, does it have any recurring or authorization, or is it just a standard line item each year based on both operational and capital budget plans?
So the road and bridge funding is really divided into two main sources. There's a mill levy that is dedicated towards maintenance and operations. That mill levy by state law is shared with the municipalities, and so that mill levy is really driven by what our maintenance and operations is. It's not something that needs to be revisited on a voter authorized basis. It's basically coming out of the general fund mill levy. The reason it's segregated out is that has to be shared with municipalities also. And then the other major source for road and bridge capital projects, so capital improvements, capital maintenance, is at the board's discretion. We've set aside roughly half of our sales tax dollars towards capital projects and capital maintenance projects across the board for the county. So that's road and bridge, facilities, we even have IT infrastructure in there. So a good chunk of that each year, we're averaging just under $2 million a year is going towards road and bridge capital maintenance. But again, that's a allocation that's discretionary to the board.
And we receive some funds as a share back from the state gasoline tax highway users trust fund.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Tim?
Just the last comment on the Trust for Public Land. One of the things, they existed in 1990, they've been around a long time. One of the things they've done a remarkably good job is providing local municipal open space programs with all the economic benefits to a town, to its vitality, to its real estate values, to its popularity of these programs. And so those are free kind of add-on things that they can provide from, I think, a reliable source, at least for the demographic of Pitkin County. Everyone's heard of them. And then the last thing I would say is, really, thank you, because as someone sitting here and listening to a lot of thoughtful contributions before we have our retreat, really thoughtful, and not all uniform. It was really an inspired kind of discussion, I think, for all of us who are here. And I'm going to ask the staff to somehow make a summary of it available for not only the trustee who couldn't be here, but for the staff, because it was really valuable.
I think it's captured on Grassroots TV, although we'll have to archive it. Graham?
In sort of response to Michael's issues about education and informing the public more about what we have done and what we have, I think we look on an election as the chance to do that. And so an election becomes, a whole educational experience as well as just trying to, get reauthorized.
Well, I think you asked politically, 2016 is going to be a huge turnout because of presidential. I think that favors causes such as this. We did renew the Healthy Community Fund in an off-year mail-in election. It was one of the lower margins it had received before, but it also was an increase. But I have a sense that it would be a good year to have some good causes, and you're going to have, I think, 1, 2, 3 county commissioner candidates running for re-election, and hopefully out there discussing the ballot measures and which ones they support, which I think was also very helpful when the Healthy Rivers Stream Fund passed. We had people running, and they were able to talk about it at debates and in their platform position. So I do think this year is favorable.
Thanks.
Any other comments, closing thoughts from the board? Or Dale, anything?
Well, I'll take this as direction that if Gary and I spend a fair amount of time in the next 6 weeks prepping a retreat packet, that'll be time well spent.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Board, we're going to move right into our future agendas, and then from there we will have a break if we. And as I said before, we do have a significant number of open discussion items, so we're going to be filling that time between now and leaving for basalt. But we'll, if we get an extra 5 minutes in on the break, that'd be great. People can grab a snack.
What do you want me to pass on?
Here we go.
So, thank you, Rachel. What I wanted to do, or first thing on our future agendas is next week, we did reserve out the 2nd and 3rd for the board's retreat. What I did not have for you last time was a draft agenda, so wanted to kind of let you know where we're at in terms of putting the board's retreat together. The location, we are going to be doing it at the Aspen Meadows. We're still nailing down a location. So the location is set. We're just trying to figure out the details of the room. Yeah. So more to come on that. The format itself is slightly different, as we've discussed. It's really going to be centered on the board with very few staff there. I am going to facilitate this year just for the types of discussions that we're having. I felt like that would work out well. We'll really, start off in the morning talking about our own kind of working agreements. I'm putting together some materials just to take an opportunity and step back and talk about the nature of your jobs, the nature of staff's jobs, how we all work together. We are working, and I would note that this is very much a draft agenda, but trying to get distributed to the board, kind of a self-evaluation on the board, how you guys operate, how you feel you're operating with staff, those sorts of things, and really use that as a basis for discussion and to do any revisiting on our working agreements or such. We then later in the morning would go into basically a review of the board's perspectives on 2015, and we've been through that exercise every year. What went well, what were challenges, what are key learnings from the previous year that we want to be sure we're focused on. It's really an opportunity to look back before we start looking at the current and future. We then break and set up for lunch. We have confirmed these speakers for the panel. So I do need to send a follow-up email just to prep them a little bit, and I might just invite a little bit of discussion around key things you might like to hear from the panelists or perspectives, questions, how we talked about teeing it up. Was really, initially in kind of a panel format, getting each speaker's perspective on, how do they view the community today? What do you see as, the community's greatest strengths and greatest challenges, and maybe if they had a magic wand, what types of things would they focus on in your seat? And then let it kind of go into a more general discussion back and forth. There's not going to be a lot of people in the room. It's going to be, roughly 10, 11, with me, and we'll probably have Kara or Phyllis to help with the facilitation. So It's going to be a pretty small, kind of informal setting to have the discussion.
I think that sounds real good to give them the prep of those 4 questions, basically.
that-
What do you see,
okay.
and if others agree, the strengths, the challenges, the opportunities, what would you do with a magic wand? You know, or other trends you'd like to discuss, but give them some structure to their thinking. I know I always appreciate that before a panel. Michael and then Patty?
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is, I don't want to be told that Highway 82, we need a, new entrance. Those are, seems, and we were told that. The traffic was terrible, I'd like to go beyond that, beyond traffic is terrible, we need to fix the entrance to Aspen. I'd like to go beyond that somehow. So that means sort of an imaginative view of town or of the county, rather than something that is self-evident. A real challenge to people.
Yeah, I don't mind
Well, just to
challenging people, but on the same time, I don't want to filter them and tell them what they can't tell us, even if they think it's the most glaring
I'm
problem.
not actually trying to do that, Rachel.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
What I'm trying to do, now, if you'll listen, was to encourage an imaginative answer. Because the last time I heard was that the traffic was bad and we needed more housing. That's something I already know. And that doesn't really engage people's imagination. Right? I want their imagination engaged. I don't want to hear about the problems that are self-evident.
Perfect.
Did you want to tag on to that,
Yeah,
George?
just real quickly, I mean, one of the words that Michael used was town, and I think we talked about this earlier. I really don't want to hear about City of Aspen issues. We're the county, and I wanted to have a broader discussion. And these people, they touch different places in the county, whether they're through the foundations or whether it's through development or recreation. So, and you have some young people here, which is great too. So what do they want to see? How do they want to envision the county in 20 years for their kids? But a really broad perspective. I don't want to get tied down, and I agree with Michael, I don't want to get tied down and hear about the entrance to Aspen or issues about the city. This is an opportunity to take a much broader look at what we as the county commissioners and future county commissioners could be looking at in terms of making our county as best as we can in terms of providing the services and programs that we're responsible for.
Patty?
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also think, though, if they have some creative, thoughtful way of presenting an idea to us as to how we can increase, improve, or whatever, our collaborative efforts, our communication efforts with the municipalities in Pitkin County, be it Basalt, Aspen, even Carbondale that fringes down in that neck of the woods. I wouldn't mind that perspective, they might have some great idea, something that we haven't thought of. But as to the specific issues that are confined within the jurisdiction, municipal boundaries, yeah, I'm kind of, we know that, we hear that when we have our joint meetings, but if they have some suggestive ideas of how we can improve the communication collaboration efforts, I think it's a great group of panelists. Are they going to be included in the reflections part, the 2:15 to 3:15, or are we going to just?
Was not planning on that, as planned that as just kind of the board's opportunity to reflect on what did you hear, what did you think it meant. Does it change anything in terms of your views of what even went well or key learnings we should have had from 2015?
Yeah, I just want to see how the other board members, do the other board members want to have them there or not there, or just have our discussion? I'm just throwing it out there. I have another question on just in the agenda in general. On day 2, on February 3rd, what are you meaning by trend reviews and key indicators review? What is?
Just going to give you.
You're going to give us some things.
Yeah. Basically, there's probably a report similar to what we provided last year from the Headwaters. I don't know if you remember that one. But there were a few key stats there that I think, drive some interesting discussion, whether it be about income, housing, those sorts of things. So that's something that we can take out. It's more just kind of the general demographics kind of picture.
Well, and of interest in that, at the workforce meeting, believe it or not, we were talking about unemployment rates, and I asked the local person from Glenwood Springs, the Roaring Fork Valley unemployment rate, which is what Rachel had mentioned earlier today's meeting, is about 3%. So it's kind of, we have no unemployment rate if you look at maybe within the demographics of that, what that numbers are, what that 3% means. But that's kind of an interesting thing.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, and the other thing that came up in today's meetings was that contractors, that industry is out 2 years booked. That's another interesting thing. How are we going to do construction? How's that going to affect the building departments? And that's a trend that we're seeing more and more of. So that was just a thought. The other last question I had is on the board perspectives on day one of two. Can you give us some information on, or just a little update as to what we discussed in prior years? Like maybe a couple years, 14, 13, 12 or something. Just so we have that to see where we've been and where we're headed.
So, kind of the plus delta exercise.
Because I think it'll be pretty easy from the other retreats. Just as packet information. But I think all in all, it looks great, and I'm excited to be able to do this. I think that Meadows is a great venue. It's a perfect location, I think, out there. They have great facility.
Yeah. Michael.
So, a question that occurs to me is to ask a question, is so the question I would ask is, Pitkin County, is that an outdated concept in the Roaring Fork Valley? In other words, I bet, a third of these people don't live in Pitkin County. And do their shopping somewhere else. And so what I'm getting at is the valley now is more of a valley concept. And what seems to be holding us back in terms of this are these jurisdictions.
Funny you'd say.
Or how do people manage those jurisdictions? I live in this municipality, I cross into this county, I go up to another municipality. What is that? I'm not sure what it is any longer. I know when I go to Algebel and go shopping at Whole Foods, there are thousands of people that I have no idea where they came from or who they are. And that's a new experience for me.
Patty?
Well, it's funny you would say that because just in the last couple of weeks, I've been hearing from not a lot of people, but from a few more that it's stuck in my brain about the concept of the Roaring Fork County. And people are saying, why don't you guys annex that sliver of Eagle County? So we tried that, we've been there, we looked at the economic factors in that. But then people are saying, well, what about the end that's Garfield? And I'm like, and then what about the end that's Gunnison? Why isn't it the Roaring Fork County? And I'm like, I've never really looked at that whole picture of creating that new county. But it's funny that I've been kind of hearing that because of the what do I want to say, the dissolving or the whatever of the boundaries, because we travel more and more valley-wide and between friends and family and shopping and business and all those things, it is becoming more of a valley-wide community. Therefore, people are talking about a valley-wide county, which I think is an interesting thought.
Yeah, and maybe it isn't about jurisdictions at all. Maybe it's people are saying, I don't care about any of those jurisdictions. It isn't even important to form a new jurisdiction. The last thing I want is a jurisdiction, but I want a concept of something else.
Yeah.
Other comments?
I think it's good.
I have to say I'm kind of feel disengaged from the conversation now. I live in Aspen. That's my district. I'm a county resident, Powney's a county resident, and we're also city residents. And I think that's where the majority of our population lives, between the airport business center and town. And we just said, entrance to Aspen, we're not going to discuss that. That's not a big problem. We already know that's a problem. We don't want our people to tell us about that problem. Affordable housing, we know that's a problem. We don't need these people to tell us that's a problem. I mean, have we taken these topics off the list as major concerns of residents of Pitkin County so that we can talk about what are more esoteric items, like should we be the Roaring Fork Valley, or, how do we do this? I feel the issues that are most pressing, and I think will continue to rise in the public's mind, are the entrance to Aspen, especially when all those building permits come through and the construction picks up, like mad, like it will do this summer. And the city's only avenues that we're reading about are raising paid parking rates this summer. So I have a hard time telling folks we want to hear about other problems than what may be what they're confronting in their day-to-day life, or their employees or their workforce are confronting in their day-to-day lives. So, I'll just weigh in that's a little bit of a concern about how we've just tried to structure what people were asking as panelists to tell us about. But, that's where the board's going, that's fine.
Rachel, that's why I brought up the idea if they have some thoughts for us about how we can increase the communication, collaboration with the municipalities, because we can talk ourselves till we're blue in the face about the entrance to Aspen and people coming into the municipality where I live too. And if we don't have that cooperative, collaborative relationship with the city, how are we going to solve it as county commissioners? It's within the city's jurisdiction. So it would be great if these minds that may sit in that traffic have some ideas outside of the box of, that we haven't thought. If we don't have that relationship with the city of Aspen, what are we going to do about it?
Great.
And I might just offer a perspective at the risk of sounding too diplomatic here, but I think these things end up connecting, because I think defining how we define what our community is, which is actually really kind of what I'm hearing in the questions, is our community defined by a political boundary or jurisdictional boundary, or is our community defined by something else? And I think that conversation could go to, well, our community is all these people, whether it's the people we're not used to seeing collecting in a certain place, or workforce that we're moving back and forth over some area that crosses a lot of jurisdictions. And that starts to set a context, I think, for exactly what you were talking about, Rachel, that quickly kind of starts to pinpoint down on, well, how you view the entrance to Aspen problem, for example, is very much affected by how you view what is our community. If it's very municipal centric, probably not a problem. The idea is, how do you get less cars in? If it's, that, well, actually we've got a workforce that's going back and forth, maybe it's a different discussion that animates that solution. I think you guys are actually wrestling with similar questions at various levels, and I think if we ask our panelists to think bigger picture at first, then I think the conversation will naturally kind of funnel down probably into some themes that we're used to seeing. The value comes in, is there a new context that helps us think about, oh, well, the entrance to Aspen problem isn't about less cars in Aspen, it's something else. Or housing is maybe something that we should be looking at more on a regional basis. Or all these things that we're already working on, because we've got a pretty full agenda in terms of projects that we're working on right now. How do we inform the desired outcomes there? We're going to get an update on our broadband project. I think she's behind the pillar. Good. Maybe that should be a bigger effort or a more focused effort, depending on how we view that community. So I think I will try as a facilitator to try and generate those questions, because I'm hearing the interest at kind of a visionary level, which you guys don't actually get a lot of opportunity to talk about, right? Things come to you as specific issues to deal with. So what I'm hearing is, hey, let's get up here first before we just drill down and assume that these are things we should be talking about.
That's fine with me. I was the first one when we talked about the retreat to say I just wanted to make sure the panelists weren't Aspen-centric. Yeah. But I also don't want to filter when they say this is the biggest problem I see, or this is the biggest challenge, or something like that. Other board member comments?
So this looks generally headed in the right direction, and The SOAR exercise is really more of a general exercise after we've heard the stories and such, to kind of focus on what do we see as our strengths, opportunities, assets. The real meat is getting to the results that you all want to see.
We have
That's
2
all I've
minutes
got.
left for the rest of the future agendas.
And that's all I've got on future agendas,
Okay,
actually.
nothing else has changed? A little more information. Did anybody else have anything on the future agendas? Okay, and then the one item would be that I believe it is the week of the 23rd. I will not be here. I'll be at NACO, and so Michael will be chairing the work session of the 23rd and the regular meeting of the 24th. And did anybody else have anything? Okay, then we will take a break and reconvene here at 3 o'clock for, let's see, we have a letter on the Carrot-Donovan Public Lands Bill, which is being heard in committee tomorrow. We just talked about the retreat, which is great. We also have the broadband update, the facilities update. John Kinney's coming in to talk about the scoping discussion with the FAA, any additional basalt prep we need to do, and certainly other things that other commissioners would like to bring to open discussion. Great. Thank you very much. We'll take a break and we'll be back here at 3. Welcome back, everyone. It is the work session of the Board of County Commissioners. It's Tuesday, January 26th. It's about 3 in the afternoon. We're going to a series of open discussion items, and then when we adjourn, we are going to be going down to Basalt for a joint meeting with Basalt. So, John, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, so we had a number of items that, and some of them got added in. We're going to start off with an update on our broadband project, go into facilities. We are going to start doing an every other week, kind of like what we're doing with facilities, having a representative from the airport come in and talk about the EA. Of course, the first week we were going to do that, we had canceled our regular meeting to do our retreat, so we went ahead and moved John up to this week. And then we've got a letter to Carrie Donovan on some legislation, and then wanted to visit one more time about the Basalt meeting. So with that, we've got Kara and Phyllis here to give us a broadband update.
Sure. So we, last summer, we came to you guys at the end with a presentation on phase 1, and from there went into phase 2, which is a preliminary design and analysis. And we just had our kickoff meeting with the consultants. It's forethought.net/brainstorm. They're based out of Denver and Durango, and they've been doing a lot of other projects elsewhere in the state. And so just had the kickoff meeting with them and wanted to update you guys on where we're going with phase 2. And so really we're working with Brainstorm and forethought.net, and then also bring in another group, Neofiber, who's actually based out of Glenwood Springs, to also help us out with some of the stakeholder outreach that we're planning for phase 2. So what we're really looking at in this phase is, we heard what you guys said last time, and trying to work more in the underserved and unserved areas. So what we prioritize is what we called the drainages, which is really a lot of the areas that are outside of Highway 82, including all of the Crystal River Valley and Highway 133. And speaking to the point earlier you guys were talking about, we are not confined to Pitkin County right now. We are keeping it at the Roaring Fork watershed level because it is still an entire network design, and really to get to all these different areas, there's so many linkages that we don't even know what they will be, that we're just keeping it tied to the entire Roaring Fork watershed, which includes Gunnison County and Marble, up through Garfield County and the southern part of Garfield County with Carbondale, Eagle County, which we need to get up to Thomasville, and then obviously all of Pitkin County. So that's really the scope of the geographic area where they're looking at. And what we're going to be doing is creating an asset review of what are all the towers that Pitkin County owns, we've learned a lot through the radio transition, what are the other different tower and infrastructure that can be utilized and leveraged to get to those underserved and unserved areas in the quote-unquote drainages of the area. And then focusing on the drainages also opens up what are those connection points to existing fiber that might help snowball effect into improving capacity elsewhere within the valley floor. So the first task is really an asset review, moving into that network plan. What does it look like? What are the cost models associated with it? And what kind of coverage are we looking at? Are we looking at 80% coverage and X amount of dollars, 90% coverage and X amount of dollars, 99% coverage and X amount of dollars? I think 100% coverage is going to be really hard, so we'll go with 99%. And then the third task is going to be a deployment plan. So what is that phasing? You know, in the RFP, we were hoping to get 5 years, but is that realistic? And again, moving in with the cost and those pieces. So we just wanted to come to the board and give you guys an update of what phase 2 is really focusing in on and check in with you about our priorities from what we heard last time is really, again, focusing on the unserved and underserved areas, and then also creating diversity of pathways and redundancy as well, and really looking at what kind of network can be created based on those key priorities. And then obviously speed and cost, hopefully as a cumulative impact of focusing on those other parts.
George?
Tara, what sort of time frame for phase 2?
Thank you. We're expecting to have it done in April. We made it 4 months? 4 months, but then with an expectation that if they need to get up to towers, that they could extend it for up to a month. So we expect our hope is to have it finalized by spring, early summer, so that if there are opportunities to build or work with the radio transition that we're working on, that Jeff Kruger is simultaneously working on, that we can leverage what might be built this summer and can at least know about it before we're all the way through construction season and then we're late.
So when you say what may be built, are you does that include new towers?
Not right now.
Okay.
We don't know.
Well, we do have some upgrades on our translator. We'll probably have a new tower going up at Williams, so a replacement tower, so it's not a new tower. But we want to be able to engineer it in a way that if it's a good space for a connection for a broadband, that there's enough capacity on that tower, in that building, in that generator, to be able to add a broadband connectivity site at that location. So that's what we're trying to do with the plan, is to be able to have the plan created so that anything we do, we can use either what we have or what we're going to do with our 800 public safety radio system change. There's going to be some additions and upgrades to some facilities. So if we're going to upgrade, let's upgrade all the way to add capacity. So either broadband or maybe even cellular is going to be possible on some of these sites.
So I guess I should have asked, what I was thinking was more any new locations.
We don't know. We won't know that until we get through this phase.
From our preliminary kickoff meeting, there may be in some of the drainages where we can build, first you have your main line and then you create a backbone coming off of there. But maybe to get further into some of the drainages, they'll need some towers or connectivity or fiber, and that's really what we're asking for in the plan. What does it look like? And it's interesting how many places there's fiber and where do they end. So that's the asset first part of our phase 1 is what assets are out there. Where does CenturyLink have a line? Where does Comcast have a line? Where is their capacity to lease other fiber that we can use? What does Holy Cross have? We don't know.
Okay.
That's what I was going to bring up. What's about the Holy Cross aspect in this? Because remember, we talked about being able to use some of their infrastructure and the easement problem we might have with how we then get all those easements amended. So I'd like to see that still considered, because I still have people contacting me about that. The other thing I have is, we're moving on here a little bit later to the CCI agenda issues. And there are 3 issues on here about broadband. Okay, you guys are already in on that. Have you already? So we only have 6 we can move forward. Do you have a preference out of the 3? You know, the one, broadband deployment and adoption, rural infrastructure, and what was the other one? There's another one in here. I think there's 3.
Yeah, I
right?
saw at least 2.
FirstNet implementation.
Oh, that, yeah.
So do you guys have a preference of one of those we should, all
I just
3?
glanced at them, so
Okay.
I couldn't tell you if one over the other, but.
I'm not so sure FirstNet has been as important, or
It's a broader international, national, it feels like international, national
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have a preference, Russ? We
No,
just-
and to Rachel's point, I think there is a lot of engagement on the FirstNet side, so I guess if you have to pick and choose, that one probably still has someone carrying it forward.
Forward anyway?
That would be my guess.
You know, speaking of who has lines, where I sat next to the community liaison for Comcast at the Club 20 meeting. He gave me his card to bring back to you guys. He said any way he can help us, he'd be happy to. So there you go.
The new one?
A new
It's
contact.
a new one. A new person. So, yeah. So
Always good.
You just never know where that's going. And the other thing that came out of that meeting was more tangential conversations. But one of the heads of the Colorado Rural Electric Association was there to say, nobody's talked to us about the broadband access easement issues. And I don't know how to begin that engagement. I realize we have talked a little more directly with our local provider, Holy Cross, but it's the larger affiliation of rural electric associations that we should probably, either through Northwest COG or other people who are looking at this as the solution. I know, is it Region 10 out there is really looking at that as a solution. People were kind of back and forth about whether there's a legislative fix to that, whether there's not, or anything like that, but those conversations have started, and I think it'd be valuable to make sure we're networking appropriately with our REAs in case that is part of our solution.
It's a great reminder.
Pass that around. Other questions or comments on the broadband? There seem to be none, so we'll let you guys off the hook and carry on the good work. Appreciate it very much. And we'll move on to the next topic.
Okay, the next one we have is a facilities update. I think we have Jody behind the pillar and. yeah,
And
and
Dave's
Dave.
here too. Yeah, they're following that phone now. Here, just keep
So I'm good. Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about the library and then talk about the elections and the clerks. And then Dave will talk about the new facility and the 911 relocation. So with,
Okay, because we do have about 15 minutes on the agenda for this.
okay. The library work is in progress. We just got our new skylights there in. It made a huge difference in the lighting there. The reading pods are in. I was over there about an hour ago and there must be 80 workers there. The drywall's going in, the lights are going in. It's really exciting. And really my message to you guys is that we are on time. We were scheduled to move back in May. We're going to hit that mark. The movers will be starting, they're scheduled to arrive on April 11th. And we will start moving all of the furniture and the books, and all the furniture is ordered, except for a couple little pieces. The shelving's ordered, the signs are ordered, so, and thanks to Katie and her procurement professionalism, she's really been a great help for us. But so all of the procurement is really pretty much done, and we're moving right along. The one thing that I did want to also talk about is that I don't know if you guys are aware, but we had to move 30,000 square feet of library shelving, books, furniture, all of that into a storage over this period, this last year, so that we could do the renovation. And if you recall, the renovation kind of came after the addition. We only had money for the addition. We've had some really generous donors, and we were able to do the actual renovation in the main part of the building. And that kind of scooched us into another place of where we had to store the rest of it and get into that mode of moving. And so Related, who is up in Snowmass Village, they're doing the development up there. They generously gave us 4,500 square feet of space in their parking garage where we could leave our stuff in a safe, dry place. And they donated that to us for, we had an agreement with them to be out of there in February. They just granted yesterday to give us the extension through till May when we get moved in.
That's terrific.
Yeah, it was, and you know, that was really a significant donation from them. I haven't done all the numbers, but it's in the $150,000, $160,000 range. And so I just wanted to recognize Related for doing that for us. It's been a really great save here.
Well, with the blessing of the board, I'd like to have John prepare a thank you letter that we could send them and sign from the board. I really appreciate that. And I have no idea if they were intending this as a donation that they can take off their taxes, but to be able to quantify and give them the appropriate receipt for that is appropriate.
Yep, and I've offered them that as well. So.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the second thing, we are, as Dave will be talking about, is the getting ready to move and the plans for the projects. Oh, it looks like he's going to talk about the election.
Oh, I didn't hit that button, sorry.
Oh, you can go ahead. I'll do that. So I'll let him talk about those. But the other thing I just wanted to give the board a heads up on is that my office, we've been thinking about this communication plan, and I know that the board is usually interested in what is our communication plan when we're doing projects. And so we've just recently put together a small group of employees, from frontline staff to managers to a section leader, to kind of start this communication about how we can get our employees that are going to be involved in this relocation really engaged, get them excited, inspired by the move, and then how they, start incorporating a weekly message of today is the day to start purging your, files in your cabinets, or we're having a purge day to go down into a storage area and let's get that purged. And we don't know what it looks like, but we're starting to develop that. And it's really our goal to get people really understanding why we're doing it, how we're doing it, how their involvement is. IT's involved as far as how our opportunities for scanning and stuff like that. But I just wanted to let you know that we're doing that, and there will be messages coming out weekly to the organization, which you guys will be a part of.
So we have to purge and purge and purge too.
Right.
Just on that topic, I don't know the general availability, but it may be that within some departments having a scanner available for a certain time period to be able to scan documents in and then be able to chuck the hard copy and have the middle. But just let people know that that is available. Sometimes it's a lot easier to let go of something when there's some sort of record of it somewhere.
And we just spent the last hour upstairs talking with the BITS director and the documents. Yes.
That's great. That's really good to integrate. Thank you. Please continue.
Sure. So, real quick on moves. So elections, the work will be complete on February 12th, which is a Friday. We're going to move over that weekend. That's to the Ute City building. And they'll be up and running that Monday at Ute City. Clerk, we got our permit today. Construction will start Monday. And we're looking at April 14th to have that done. The construction work will actually be done a little sooner than that. But because of the DMV coordination and just wanting to move everybody at once, we'll move that following Monday. DMV is all set to redo all of their systems, which are separate from ours. But that's all going wonderfully, swimmingly. Balance of staff, which Jody was just talking about, which is down in Basalt. You've got that. I don't know if you already hit the Basalt lease yet.
That's tomorrow.
We've done first reading. So
tomorrow, yeah, tomorrow's second reading. So we had our design team down there today, and we're getting started on the design work for that. The remodel will happen over the summer, planning to move, planning meaning what Jody was just talking about in terms of all those logistics with all the employees in here, when you pack, when you purge, all that stuff will happen now through June. That final packing of stuff into boxes in June, move July or August. We still have to get through a couple of hurdles to know exactly when that'll get pinned down. And then there's that note about the committee to get things going. I think that's a really good move on Jody's part.
Is that later than we originally talked, or is that?
It's a little bit later, yeah. We had originally talked sooner. What we've done, which I'll talk about here on this slide, which is kind of the last item, but I'll jump to that. We've been working in collaboration with the city on utility relocations, because a lot of our utilities and their utilities end up going to the same place, or we have that chicken and egg thing. If their project were going and ours weren't, they would have to relocate a lot of the stuff that goes through the old alley back here. And if we were going first and they weren't, we would have to relocate a lot of this stuff, all the stuff. So we're working together to come up with a plan that we'll jointly participate in that makes all of that joint stuff happen. A lot of that will move up to Main Street in terms of the water, the electric will all move up to Main Street. Some of the other stuff will pick up down in Rio Grande, but when we're done, essentially all this stuff that's in the old alley will be gone. So that'll be happening sooner in collaboration with them. But yeah, our timeline in terms of the move out, because of the hiccup we had in finding a space down in Basalt, kind of put us back a little bit. It's not problematic for the big job because it's still kind of coming together, but it is a little bit later.
Can I just add on? Rachel, when you talk about, and I think it's good to work in coordination with the city's project, but we just need to keep in mind that we can't really be delayed any further. So we need to make sure that we're on that same time track, because it's critical, I think, for us, since we're already a little behind, I think a little more behind. It really comes into play with all the leases we have and all the moving around we're going to have to do. So whatever we can do to facilitate the city being on the same time frame, I think is important.
We meet with them, with their whole design team. Every 2 weeks we have a joint coordination meetings to make sure we're not getting off track or getting too far down a different path. Make sure we're always
That's
like
really
this.
critical for
Yeah,
us.
it is, yeah.
Well, and I think part of the discussion is that we're always looking at, if we have to go independently, can we?
Can we,
And they're looking at that as well. So, I mean, I think if we're always...
That's good to know. So if something really snags one or the other
Correct.
can move forward.
Yeah, understanding that our ability and willingness to work together can save both of us considerable dollars, and so we, while it may be less brain damage to go it alone on some things, the cost benefit to work together about how we might grade on a property line really helps both of us, so we need to keep that dialogue going.
To that end, when do we think we're going to be submitting to the city's land use process?
Right now it's scheduled for March.
Okay.
So the very first item was we just got the revised elevation from our last get-together when we looked at the exterior models. We've got that new one. We need to just vet it a little bit on our team to make sure we're comfortable showing it to you, that we don't have problems, concerns from the project team. But I think that'll either be coming next week if I can make that happen, or the week after. So you can see that. That's really the last piece that we need in order to then compile our application for locations and extents into the city process. We have to have, you're okay that hey, this is what we're going to submit. We don't want to submit without your blessing. So once we get that, we'll be compiling, and then it should go in March. Again, that's a 60-day kind of expedited process. So right now, that's not critical path to our ultimate start.
Okay, thank you.
We did talk last week about some water savings and some utility issues, and I just wanted to bring answers back to those questions without getting into specific fixtures. And that our current plan compared to what we have now, understanding that the new plan even has more fixtures than this building will have, we're still anticipated to save 30 to 40,000 gallons per year, which is 0.09 to 0.12 acre feet. John wanted me to put it in acre feet, since that's
John
how you...
Ely or John Peacock?
Yeah. I never deal in acre feet, that's not me. So, there's substantial savings, really substantial savings in terms of what we're doing compared to just what we have now, and we'll have almost twice the building. Actually, more than twice. Our 40K BTUs per square foot goal is actually about just over a 70% improvement over what we have now. We're running 140 something KBTUs in this building.
And that's per square foot.
Per square
not
foot.
Total.
Correct. So it's 70% better than what we're currently experiencing in this building now, and again, still 44% more efficient than what Aspen City Code would require. So we think that is a goal that's right on target. We already talked about construction start.
And utilities.
Yeah, and utilities. And then just dispatch relocation to North 40. So we have a planning application in, and I'll show you here in a second just the two little components that relates to. We're just finishing up the design and the bidding and coordinating that with the furniture and equipment required for dispatch. We're going to start construction in March. Plan is to have everything operational in August. What is going to planning, and I thought just because, oh crap, not a great picture. Looks great on the computer, but
Looks good.
yeah. So there you go, much better. In the new room, it'll be so easy to do this. So there's really two components to what's going. It's county planning. We already had a neighborhood meeting here 2 weeks ago about this prior to it going into the planning process. We wanted to give the neighbors the opportunity to see it before it went into planning, but now it's into planning, and there's two pieces. One is the new radio tower, antenna tower that we need. The current plan is that it would attach to the training tower of the fire station and extend up. And while this particular version of the rendering makes it look like it's the highest thing in the world, it's actually lower than these flagpoles that we have existing. It's lower than some other stuff. It doesn't impact any ridgeline views. So we think it's the only way we can go. The other option is a taller tower that sits over here. Well, I won't say taller, a bigger tower that sits over here freestanding. But we didn't think that was going to be well received.
So no FAA issues?
No FAA issues. We've run that path. The guy back there. So the other issue, and you wouldn't know it was there if I didn't tell you, they were always designed in this facility, always had a design for an emergency generator to support their needs. It's a public safety building. We're finally going to install that generator as part of this project, and we thought it would be better for the community behind if we enclosed that in a somewhat architecturally nice box to protect it from the weather and to protect the sound from going to the neighbors. So the application shows a small enclosure that kind of matches the building. That's it. That's all.
Questions? I love the metal, by the way.
Oh, do you?
Library metal, just as I envisioned it.
I have pictures, but
It blends with the brick, it's really cool. That was nice of Jerry to take me over there.
good.
Okay, let me get the lights. Any other board questions? Looks like good work, and carry on. Keep us on schedule and on budget. We like that.
On schedule.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I will not touch projector.
So next item is invited John and Pat to come in, just talk about, we're getting ready to launch our scoping period and efforts and outreach around that on the EA, and just wanted you to know what we're doing, because I know the board had a lot of questions about that, particularly while we were going through budget and such.
John's going first. Just one moment, please.
I know you're going to have a slideshow.
Yeah.
Sure.
John, I wanted to tell you, I was at the ANACRA meeting this morning, and virtually everyone there said that your staff, yourself, have done a fantastic job this,
Oh, that's nice.
this holiday season, and they wanted to convey their thanks to you for.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Michael, and I'll definitely pass it on to staff. So it was actually a lot of fun, but yeah.
You're a brave soul.
People were in need.
Well, I just want, can I add on to
Thank
that? I just want to let you know that I did a tour the other day with Dustin. He was terrific. He took me through the new construction and where things are going to be. It looks great. You really can't even tell that we're in that process. It's been really well handled, and I appreciate that.
Oh, very
Dustin
good.
was terrific.
Thank you. Yeah,
I missed you. You had just disappeared somewhere. So Dustin, I grabbed Dustin, and he gave me a little tour.
He knows more, so that's good.
we
Thank you. So, good afternoon. We're here to really kind of give you an update on kind of our next step in the environmental assessment. And this has been somewhat of a challenging process because along the way it's presented some opportunities for us to have some kind of mid-game adjustments. So if you recall, we originally had 2 environmental assessments, and one was focused on the terminal area, and the second one was focused on the air side as well as the west side of developments. Additional monies presented themselves with the FAA, the economies of scale to combine those 2 and to really bring clarity to the community who loud and clear said 2 EAs is very confusing. So we rolled them into one. And then we began that process and the dialogue with the community. And we were probably out there about well over a dozen times, all the way from Carbondale to Basalt to Snowmass to Aspen and every place in between, from homeowners associations on site with them to terminals and Rotary clubs, and just explaining to them that we're really focusing on 2 areas. One was the runway itself, and the second was the terminal building and the terminal area around it. And that the west side development was really kind of dropping off the immediate radar scope, but would still stay on the long-term scope. So in doing so, through that process, we got some great feedback. Our list now to reach out to the folks for scoping meetings is over 500 folks that will be engaging and inviting them to participate. So we're really in the first box on the far left there where it says airport sponsor identifies the project. So the scope of our project now is a new terminal building, associated roadways. Let me go to the next slide, actually, I'll come back to that. So it's really I'll reverse that. It's shifting the runway by 80 feet to meet the Group 3 design that the FAA is requiring that we do. There's a slight alignment for the Owl Creek Road, but within the right-of-way, including the bike path. And then associated navigational aids. They're ground-based, and it helps the pilots get to where they need to be in a safe way, as well as some other aspects. Then the second purpose and need is going to be replacement of the terminal with the associated parking and roadways. And there's some ancillary items to that of commercial service apron, noise buffering, and improvements to the hangars on the east side. The Owl Creek piping to mitigate wildlife issues, basically to take birds off the immediate vicinity of the runway that actually should be shifted up underneath the runway impact. But now back to the process, now that we have come to identifying what the scope of the project is. It's the runway, it's the terminal, and the associated area. We're now going to go out to the community once again and really kick off our environmental assessment now that we've identified the scope. So we'll be reaching out to a variety of folks in a variety of ways. Pat will talk to you a little bit about some of those unique ways that she's come up with, including bringing the community in for some events. She's finally talked me into having fire pits on the ramp, but we'll get back to that. And so that's kind of where we are in terms of this process to date. We will enter the 30-day comment period once we have our first meeting, which kicks off at the City of Aspen on the 16th, followed by the 18th up in Snowmass. And we're going to be presenting again what the independent, sorry, I forgot the title, purpose and needs are, the 2 purpose and needs are for the environmental assessment. That takes us to about March 22nd. If people need more time, we'll give them more time. We have it built into the process. And then we'll go through where the sponsor reviews and evaluates the scoping comments and go into the next phase of refine the environmental assessment study plan. This will be like in the month of April. We'll then have the environmental assessment, enter the studying of the actual items probably for about the next 12 months. about on a quarterly basis, or where significant things come out of that technical review. We'll bring it back to this body as well as to the community and let them know what's happening. And the environmental assessment and documentation process proceeds. And at the conclusion of that, about 14 to 15 month period from now, that's when the environmental assessment will be concluded. It's not even at that point that the board is committed to doing any of these developments, not till you accept the grant, which is a couple years even down the road from that. So there's plenty of time for community engagement, getting their perspective, and also for us to come back and really show you what the issues are.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Patty?
No, I'm good.
You're good?
I want to hear about the fire pits on the rail.
Oh, let me ask the one thing, and I apologize if you were going to get to it later, but we're reaching out to the people who've already been involved and come to the open houses. We have a great list from comments on the web or other avenues. Will we be doing some general newspaper ads for the public who hasn't been to those, to let them know the scoping period has started and what is the address to send comments and things like that too?
Yes, yes.
Great.
And so, yes, we have a list of what we call airport enthusiasts.
Can we
And
put the
in-
lights down?
Okay.
In addition to the agencies that we want to know what we're up to, and the community interaction, what is it called? Input committee, community input committee. And after we're going to advertise the upcoming meetings, the open houses, the way we always do, really get it out there in all the usual ways, radio, TV, internet, newspaper. And during the comment period, we're going to really be pushing Pitkin Connect, which is our online citizen engagement tool, where we're going to build a way for people to comment as we have all the way through this process. And that's worked really well. What we found with Pitkin Connect is that a lot of people look at it. We can tell every time somebody views it, every time someone looks at it. We have to deduct how many times we look at it. You know? I like to look at it a lot, so take 10 times out for me.
Every day.
But we get a lot of looks and we get quite a few comments, and we're going to be pushing it heavily during this month-long comment period that, as John said, can be extended if need be. So we'll be doing some additional advertising to get the word out about that.
Okay, and I'm comfortable with that, but again, some people are still old school, like to write letters, you know. I just like to make sure that it would meet whatever FAA standards or review of these comments being accepted this way as opposed to other ways. Now, I know that, you know, I just don't know, but I want to make sure we're totally legit. I have submitted comments and others have on things online, but it's to a specific state agency or federal agency or something, and I don't know if they would say, well, filtered through Pitkin Connect, it's not the same, and do we get the address information necessary, again, to satisfy the NEPA requirements?
I know that in order to comment on Pitkin Connect, you have to register.
Okay.
And so we get a little bit of demographic information just at the get-go, people who contribute. And we can also produce reports, the paper reports, showing the comments. Now, as far as the addresses of people who comment, I suppose we could go in and get if that were required, we could get the addresses of all the people that are engaged on
Yeah,
Pitkin
I don't
Connect.
want to do anything more than is required, but I want to make
Yeah.
sure that the scoping period passes all muster of how we conducted it.
And the consultant is collecting everything we collect. We're pushing off to the, giving to them. So
Yeah, we've got some checks in there, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Quick update on the terminal expansion. Do we have
We have time.
time? Okay. If you hadn't had a chance to get out to the airport, this is actually probably better. So the actual improvements that we have done is this is as you're walking in the front door. This archway here actually has been filled in. So this is solid material here. In the center, it's all glass, solid material here. There's a header right along here on the back side where a cage will come down and then encapsulate and keep the sterile area sterile overnight, which will help the TSA every morning. They have to come in and do a variety of types of sweeps. This particular door was moved out about 10 feet towards your view, and the monitors up here were installed so that people have a visual cue of exactly what we're doing. On each side here will be the arrivals and departures, and then the center here as we're telling people, these are the flights that are immediately boarding. If you're not on these flights, don't worry about it, we'll come get you. Here is a couple new pieces of art that we're borrowing a wall right now. That's part of the World Cup. All right, that was Miss Phyllis's idea that turned out to be great. So there they are, a little bit, some really neat paintings that we just hung up there on Friday. This Friday is when this project will go to the expanded version. So looking back, here is the security screening checkpoint. This wall is new. If you went through here and immediately turned right, you would go to the family restroom as well as the men's restroom. This is where the second drop-down gate will come down, and that will then create a sterile area here. So this gate comes down. This used to be a wildlife display.
Collage or something.
Yep, and we worked with John McBride, and he's going to put that elsewhere in the community. So these will be a variety of TV monitors as well as some flight displays and then actual live shots on the ramp, because people always complain when they're sitting in this area, they don't know what's going on in terms of their flight. So they'll actually be able to see that unfold. So now looking directly back from where I was standing before, this is where passengers today exit from the ramp into the terminal area. So this wall area here was added along with this wall, that you're going to expand the leasehold here for the gift shop to put in a magazine rack, which they have. There's a little bit more art over here now, but this is where the pass-through is going to be, where people will then go into the non-sterile area, and this entire area here, along with the restaurant area that's off to the left of the red dot, left of the screen, will be the new expanded sterile area. This is the gate, what it will look like at the TSA that comes down from the ceiling, as well as the gate material that also comes down that I showed in that previous picture. When we expand this, this is the one that goes up. So you'll go through the TSA screening, traverse over to the corner here, and then you'll flow right into the restaurant area. This is now the new terminal, or the airport administration entrance. The door used to be here, only moved over about 8 feet. Here's some additional art. We had to put in a variety of floor coverings in here for some of the technology for compliance with the TSA. So if you're wondering why the carpet floor coverings changed, and then immediately on the other side, that's looking back. So this is where that backflow preventer will go, and it'll be a glass wall that basically a corridor that people will go through. And here's some additional pictures of the art that was just hung. So this is to be going live this Friday, is the anticipated time frame. The CABA unit, which is the glass corridor backflow preventer here, that will not arrive until May. So in the meantime, we'll just continue to use the existing, but expand the passenger terminal area, sterile area, starting on Friday.
Great, looks good.
Do you have more slides?
That's it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Board comments or questions?
Just keep us posted on how it goes. We
Will
can get
do.
it open and running, yeah.
Thank you for the feedback for staff. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, it's a really good presentation, and we're glad to see it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your work on the outreach, Pat. Okay, we'll go on to additional open discussion items.
Had one more quick item, and then John's here to talk about basalt. We'll move to that. Rachel had asked that we draft a letter in support of Senate Bill 16021. It's Senator Donovan's bill to designate the fourth Monday of March as Public Lands Day in Colorado. This is an item that the board had actually talked about before and had supported us putting a letter together. Kara wrote it. Oh, there you are. Okay, sorry, I couldn't see you behind the pillar there, Kara. But we just wanted to get this in front of the board. It does go to committee tomorrow, so we, if we do want to issue a letter of support, we need to get that out tonight.
One quick thing I just saw, just off the top of my head, you've got in the second paragraph, from the silver mining days to the emergency of skiing. I'm sure.
Oh, emergence, I guess that's supposed to.
There we
It
go.
all depends on the kind of day you're having.
Yeah.
That's,
It is emergency, definitely.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, on the fifth paragraph, It says the proposal of public lands in Colorado is not just a celebration of the impact public lands. I would have the beneficial impact, not just impact.
But it said the benefits of public lands.
Well, just a positive statement, whatever you.
Yeah,
So
impact
beneficial
just seems
impact.
negative to me, so the benefits of public land. Public land sound on to me, whatever the grammar flows there.
Okay.
Where did you get that number, John? It seems low that commercial activities in White River National Forest grossed over $9 million in 2014. It's got to be way, 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 way higher than that.
That's what I found from
Oh,
the
yeah.
Headwaters website.
I mean-
It's just on the leases on Forest Service land.
Yeah, but you got ski areas on Forest Service lands. I mean, that number's off.
leases?
I will have to double check if it includes the leases. It might just be.
Yeah, that number, you almost should leave that out because that's way low.
Can I go back to Michael's paragraph? You need to just clean up the language, but a recognition that these public lands belong to U.S. citizens. I know we're looking to tighten it up, but just so that you can grammar it right, so, thanks. It says U.S. citizens.
Oh, well, it should be all U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yes.
We're going on to page 4 now.
Yeah, I know, I appreciate you keeping it on one page and how difficult it is. I think we could change a little bit to say Pitkin County is a headwaters community. It's a headwaters county in the heart of the Rocky Mountains. We don't reference here, and I suppose it will come through other testimony, but the Colorado Rockies and the Colorado River provide clean, pure drinking water for close to 40 million U.S. residents well outside of our state boundaries. And so that's, they're the ecological services of public lands. I don't think we really can work it in and get it onto one page.
That's a whole nother letter about headwaters and water.
But then I think that this is really valuable, and I would add maybe fully supports, something. This is a big issue. I think it's unfortunate the bill has been sent to what's generally referred to as the Kill Committee already, and I think that relates somewhat to the interest in those to transfer federal lands to the state for state dispersal. And so they're putting it in the Kill Committee so that most people won't have to take a vote on it and show where they stand on retaining public lands as public lands or not. So it's important to weigh in. I appreciate our senator kind of bringing it to greater attention.
I have another request, so if and when this passes, I'm going to be positive on that. Let's make sure we do something to honor that date.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And it will probably reemerge in the House with Diane Mitch Bush as a sponsor should it fail in the Senate. And so we might have time to elaborate more fully on some of the real economic impacts and the other benefits. Because clearly Pitkin County has spent tens of millions of dollars augmenting the public land parcel, and I think that should be noted as on behalf of our citizens. But this is certainly fine for now. And John, I want to make sure we have on our agenda that we're going to do the CCI legislative issues next, as opposed to the others. I don't know how long this item is compared to.
I was wondering, since John's here, if we might do the basalt prep and then go back to the CCI.
Okay.
If that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's okay.
I got him here. But
Yeah, okay, that's great. I just want to make sure we realize that these have to be in by Friday of this week, and this is the one time when we have a little advantage by having 5 commissioners, each getting to fill in an individual form. And so our votes can help sway what's there. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes, and we'll hear from our attorney now.
So we each get to do one of these?
Yes. Yeah, we don't have to.
I don't need a clean sheet.
We can get that.
We can do it tomorrow after our regular meeting, too.
We can.
If we need to.
If we need to. I have to drive to Denver tomorrow night, so
I don't think it'll take that long.
This is just a quasi-informational sort of brief discussion prior to driving down to Basalt. In discussions between John and myself, we were wondering, number one, if you guys have any questions, particularly to the discussion of Basalt, or any directions that you might want to lead the discussion or the dialogue. I can tell you that the way it's presented by BOCC staff in setting up this item on the agenda is, in a way that I would agree, it is for the BOCC and Pitkin County conversation to continue and ensure that the council, from their point of view, also for us as well, are aware of the more current work on these items, which these items are river restoration and the kayak park, and to discuss the timing and the partnerships that might be necessary to meet the goals of both entities, the county and the town. So I think that drills down on it pretty essentially, and I think that the necessary dialogue is in that partnership aspect. I mean, I think that there is that perception on the one side of the table that the town is a permitting entity and we are a developing entity, whereas the perception on our side of the table is that we are in partnership bringing forward a project for the benefit of the community as a whole. That lends a lot of color to how things go forward in the future. I don't think developing that understanding necessarily requires establishing, say, fixed contributions or even a percentage of contributions, but an understanding that we are partners in this project and it's not simply a county endeavor. That would be my estimation of the primary goal of the meeting.
Okay. There was a little bit of a discussion that John brought to us, I think it was open discussion last week, about, you know, I guess how specific do we need to get about expectations? You know, that, you know, there's a A++ project over here and Pitkin County can fund 100% of it, or there's a, you know, good starter project that's a nice B over here and we can add on to it in the future. And do we need to go into that level of detail, or has that been, from your talking to staff?
The process that's going on right now is a community-oriented planning exercise to determine what the community wants to see this thing look like and how the community would like to see it function. And so the A through B perhaps reflects that degree of, say, investment or improvement level or potential utilization of the facility. So on the one side you have perhaps minimal improvement such that the facility blends into the natural environment and perhaps is not even readily visible as you proceed down the road or down the highway. And on the other side, sort of the opposite extreme, you have something that is improved sufficiently to have public viewing and the conduct of events, GoPro games, stuff like that. And the public process is anticipated to have 3 different meetings scheduled at intervals through the winter into the spring. We've already had 1 meeting and garnered quite a few comments. The second meeting is set for February 1st, where we'll hone down those received comments, basically explain why some have to be thrown away, either for legal or technological or geographical or other limitations or reasons, and to take what's left and put it into a project. By the third meeting, which probably be towards the end of March, beginning of April, demonstrate what that looks like to the community and let the public refine that approach. The aspect of where this is heading seems to be something, if you have one extreme or the other, more towards a nicely done, beefed out project. So you're going to be able to have the capacity for public events and other things like that. Regardless of where you might end up on that scale of improvements, either through decision of the participating entities, hopefully entities, or greater participation of the public, however you guys want to see that unfold, certain things will have to happen. And perhaps the most fundamental one is parking. And you need to get there, and you need to use it. And without being able to use it, we can't call water to it, and the whole thing is for naught. So consistent with that, I think, is what was recognized way back when by the town's then engineer Larry Thompson, was that improvements to Two Rivers roads is necessary and was always contemplated by the town anyway. That begs the cooperative partnership sort of arrangement, so that even if we're at a more limited level of improvement, there are still going to be some things that are required, in particular relation to that road, just to make it safe. When we went through the permitting process at the town, the local police department rightfully called out some concerns with safety and so forth that were incorporated within that permit approval. More than likely, those concerns would be consumed within a final plan, because it will look better, it will function better, and better serve the public. But to leave it at those minimal level of infrastructure improvements as recommended by the BOCC PD, I think you get a project that's not too good.
No.
I mean, they were looking at something that would basically prohibit, pedestrian vehicle collisions and things like that, as opposed to something that is actually more friendly and user, inviting, so to speak. But, having a fence on that very tight margin of the road right-of-way right there at that precipitous drop-off to the river, it's something, and it's better than nothing, which is why they recommended it, and it made sense, certainly, especially if we were going to go forward last year with the in-stream improvements. But at the end of the day, it's not really where you want to be when you're building a nice project.
Okay, I see George's hand and John, so you want John to go first here?
No.
Okay, George. Good, George.
I will defer.
I was just trying to load the agenda, but it's not loading. So how much time do we have? And we should just have a short presentation from Lisa, and then we'll have an opportunity for a lot of discussion.
I actually think John's going to be down
John's
there.
gonna be there.
I had misunderstood. Lisa wasn't here, or John wasn't here last week when Lisa was here. I took that to be that John wasn't going to be at the BOCC meeting, so my mistake. But we're going to be down with some of the storyboards, I think, from the presentation, and
Right.
frame up the discussion.
Right, and BOCC's also going to hang up some renderings that that our consultant, the original designer of the kayak project, also produced for the town, with a sort of a potential kind of thing for development further down the river, say from bridge to bridge, from the upper highway bypass bridge down to the Hook Spur, and what is possible in this reach to really make this a standout, if not a river park, then a recreation area and a functioning riparian habitat. So that'll be there as well.
But to answer your question, George, I think right now they're anticipating about an hour for our visit. The main topic is this. The BOCC Council, I think after reading about the recycling discussion, just wanted a brief update, which I'll provide. Mike said probably just 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'd also talked about setting out some of our future agenda topics and
Future meeting.
Yeah, and what's on their mind right now is really talking about that basalt underpass, which I think we have proposed bringing back in a March joint discussion, because they recently received a letter from CDOT that funds were going to be swept in April if they didn't figure out a way to do the project. So,
So I just pulled up their agenda. So they have a work session that starts at 5 o'clock, and their agenda item is White Water Park and River Recreational Plan. So
they're doing a prep like this.
There'll be a prep, so they'll have all this information on. So
Dinner at
we'll have plenty of
5:30.
time for discussion and give and take in case there's questions to respond to.
Yeah, and you'll see on their agenda, it also suggests that there's going to be the kid thing. That's not going to happen. We're just going to go right into having some dinner. It's going to be available at 5:30. We start at 6.
Okay.
I think they've got some other big things on their agenda.
Right, yeah. Okay, great. I want to make sure we had enough time for discussion versus just a lengthy presentation.
Yeah, I think this should be.
I think the
mostly
presentation would
discussion.
be relatively minimal.
Yeah, okay, good.
And to basically just set up the dialogue between the
Yeah.
elected boards to say, well,
Yeah.
we add
Right.
here, partnership.
I think they have a big
So-
agenda starting right after that.
Yeah.
We don't
Okay.
need to be.
Other questions from the board for John? I did have one to just kind of make sure I'm clear. When we get to the point of, quote, a final plan for this, would it identify then, here's a base of what we need to do, and then here are the first level of improvements which should be done in the first phase for safety and this and that, and then these are potentials that the community or we collaboratively could add on to that, or could add on through a GoCo application, or things like that. I guess I was getting a little bit of a sense you're saying, depending on the public feedback and output and everything, it's either going to be this very beefed up everything, final plan, that's what the community wants, but yet then we'll take that plan apart to say these are the pieces of how we might be able to accomplish that. This would be the ultimate transportation system. This is what we can afford today. This is what we plan to add on in 3 years. I mean,
Yeah, we can dress it up like that any number of different ways. The idea before of having it more defined in stages was simply because we had an active permit and a changing recommendation from DOW, or Parks and Wildlife, as far as timing and sequencing. And at this point, we don't have those issues. So, and in fact, the fisheries folks have basically come back to the original position of construction timeline, so we can get in there and do as much as we want to this year if we're prepared to go forward with it. If we're not, then we can wait. So, but it makes sense to go in with big equipment as quickly as possible. You get the job done and not have to go back and
Oh, yeah,
necessarily destroy revegetation that's already starting to take. So if we know we're going to do certain elements, it's better to do as much as we can with the heavy equipment once it's in there and get it in, get it out.
okay. And we're keeping in time the potential of GoCo cycles for applications.
Right. And in the past, just as a refresher, the county applied for GoCo grants twice. Were denied both times, and after the second denial, were encouraged to come back in with revised orientations and so forth of that. Both of those applications were done by the county by itself and did not have that partnership element of the town and county. Clearly, my recommendation is we go back in with GoCo, we go in with both entities on the application line.
Yeah.
As applicant.
When I think last time we didn't have the RISIT in hand either, and
No.
GoCo's been very hesitant to get involved in projects like that until the RISIT is determined. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Okay.
Okay, next thing, Rachel, per
These are our
your
clean
request,
copies.
yeah.
Oh, clean copies.
I wrote all of
CCI,
them.
somehow, I don't know what happened to all my copies, because I had a copy for each of you.
They get mixed into the other. Do you want to make, do you want me to run out and make some?
Well, we all have a copy now.
Well, mine's destroyed.
Well,
I mean,
we can get clean copies for tomorrow.
And then, yeah, and then this is really something that each of you submits back individually as commissioners.
What we've done before in the past is on the top of the sheet, put down your name and Pitkin County, and so that they will know that you're one of the 5. And we've talked about it a little bit before. We have 5 votes. Everyone should complete theirs or pass it along for someone else to complete, because it is a little bit of leverage. I am going to say I feel bad. I kind of missed it in the E-County newsletter in December over the break. That's when they were soliciting potential policies to be on here. And what I heard back from CCI was they had exactly one policy submitted by someone. So there's a lot of kind of repeats here, and maybe not as specific as, I mean, because I was like, wait a second, nobody submitted anything about firefighting funding, you know, it's like, wait a second, where does that go? And then also I really bristled a bit when I saw the public lands management reform, support efforts to increase active resource management with maximum engagement of the affected county governments. Good and fine. Second sentence says, this includes appropriate revenue sharing and support of the transfer of some federal lands to the states at the state's request in consultation with the counties. And I mean, I think we should be clear, there are times when we have supported land exchanges, things that are on the disposal list. You know, I think Summit County is embarking on a very large affordable housing project on some federal land that was exchanged with them from the BLM. So even when we crafted our opposition to the transfer of federal lands to the states, we acknowledge there are individual and unique circumstances. I don't like the wholesale and the way this will be read by others. So I am not going to vote for that, and I'm hoping that some of the other items, such as rural infrastructure and broadband, are more likely to rise to the top. I think it's also important to kind of take a hard look at the social services block funding, which is the only source of federal resources for county functions like adult protective services, child care for children, special needs, the TANF block grant reauthorization, you know, temporary aid to needy families. That is also important. The Older American Acts, which is the food for financing. One of the last ones that we might want to really consider weighing in on, and it's a big issue, but it's the in terms of tax reform, some folks feel that they should eliminate the tax-exempt status of municipal and county bonds, and that would be a way to help close the deficit, tax reform, but it would really raise the price of county and municipal projects. So that should be something we're aware of. Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization, you know, as you can see, there's just a huge pile of things. If I was going to guess what others will rise to the top, it's going to be waters of the U.S. And a lot of people vigorously oppose that and trying to fight its implementation. I've also counseled in the past that payment in lieu of taxes almost always rises to the top. And so when you think about what those 6 priorities are going to be when we're talking to Senator Bennett, Senator Gardner, and other legislators, you know, if you say PILT is one, and then, you know, broadband is another, you know, maybe we can have enough unity on the other items to I think we're also going to see a lot of assess the economic impacts of the clean air regulations on counties with coal production and coal power plants, because there are a lot of people would like to reverse that clean energy rule. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions on any of these topics or comments they'd like to throw out there, Patty?
Yeah, you fill out mine.
I appreciate that, Michael, and I'll take all these feedback.
So we don't have to do them the same, we can actually fill them out separately if we chose to?
Correct, you should.
Okay, I was definitely, in looking at all the broadband, I think the one on the first page, the broadband deployment and adoption, rises to the top of the broadband issues for me. Federal aviation, I'm supportive of. I think we need to really keep an eye on that. Emergency management performance grants, I think that's critical because we get so many issues where we have to do emergency management and we need to be looking for grant opportunities. Unfunded mandates has always been a concern. So I think we really need to look at that and oppose any more unfunded mandates coming down the line. I did check off payment in lieu of taxes, and I also, how many did that make?
You get 6.
So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then because I crossed out the 2, the broadband, they were mixing them up. I did have the rural infrastructure, so I think that would be my 6th.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like that one as well. It's really a challenge because one of the other important ones I didn't mention that's on this list is actually mental illness for people in jail. And we've heard from Don Bird and others that, you know, you always have a pretty healthy population incarcerated more for being off meds or self-treating with alcohol than
There's another one right above that, the mental health and substance abuse too.
yeah,
I wasn't sure if that would,
the block grants. I'm just kind of thinking about where I've heard more chatter from others, and it's about the jails and how do they deal with it in their jails and things like that, although I understand the issue there. So kind of think it through as much as anything. In the past, Patty, we've had some really bad ones that came forward, do everything you can to support Second Amendment rights and repeal all gun laws.
I didn't see
And
a lot of
that's going to rise to the top of the list in some places. So we try to vote, with enough consistency of probably others that are going to push some of these good ones up to the top. And just in the past, we've turned them into Charlotte to be able to fax off the CCI. She's out this week.
Charlotte is out, so Susan would be, and
Susan,
Patty already gave me hers, but if you're filling out, if you could give them to Susan.
And did we get any of Steve's input before I left, or?
No. I can email him. I'll email and
That'd
see if
be
it's
great.
okay to fill one in for him.
I don't think he would mind you doing that. I just think he needs to have a voice.
Yeah, we absolutely want every vote we can out of that. Let's look here. Was there anything else? Actually, I have one small last thing I wanted to bring forward, and we don't need to go into deeper discussion per se. But when I was at the winter conference for CCI, they had a really fascinating proposal or presentation of a partnership that had been created from town of Breckenridge and Summit County. And so it was through the assessor's office and treasurer's office and the ComDev, but it related to all the air nub beds that are developing in their county. And what is particularly interesting was that once you've decided to start renting a room out commercially, your interior property becomes subject to business private property taxes. And so, if you're starting to evaluate, well, I'm getting $500 a night because I've got 2 Picassos in the bedroom, it might really cost you something. But it was more the sheer volume of other community taxes that were being missed and the unfair advantage these properties have to small lodges particularly, which we try to keep the small lodges, let alone larger properties, because they're not collecting the resort fee or marketing funds, they're not collecting transportation funds, they're not collecting anything to support the police or sheriff or any of those activities, and the amount of leakage was just huge. But it was a great presentation about the collaboration and partnership that occurred between the city and the county. And so some of the copies of the ordinances that they have advanced, and what I'd like to do is just give them to John and see if we can have copies to our assessor and Cindy Hooven to take a look at, and then certainly to the city of Aspen to see if this starts to become something. I think it was the sheer volume where they came about. HomeAway is apparent to VRBO and its online companies. They state that they have over 1 million properties in 190 countries. So in Breckenridge, they found out that they had 3,086 online rentals that were, again, not contributing to the services that those guests need. And so I just thought we should see what they've done, and maybe it's too intrusive, maybe it's something we don't want to tackle at this time, but maybe it's something we should be aware of.
And we do have over 1,000 listed on VRBO just in Pitkin County.
Yeah. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue of tax leakage, that's fine, but the benefit side of it is that you have that reserve of housing available to people who can enjoy your community. And I had a presentation from the Airbnb founder at Aspen Ideas Festival, and his point of view was, listen, you're staying in a house with a host, essentially, and that host is going to point out the community to you, and is going to say, this is how to enjoy the community, and this is what you can do. And so you build up a relationship with that host, and you build up a relationship with that community. So it's actually a benefit to the community. The leakage of taxes, that's a separate issue, but the first time I came here, we rented a house. And that was back in 1964. So it's a long tradition of people renting out their property. And it's a great way to sustain the community, quite frankly. And if we have that many, if we have 1,000 places or 1,000 beds, that's an asset to the community that we need to make use of. So it's not all bad. The leakage of taxes, that's a different discussion. But the availability of hospitality and a way to enjoy the community, that's important to us.
Yeah. I would like to say I agree with you. It's a new phenomenon that everyone's looking at and seeing what the implications are, because there have been other implications, again, totally separate from taxes, that I hear about constantly at some of these broader regional meetings, and that is it has changed the affordable housing market entirely. And so people who used to rent a bedroom and do $700 a month, and it was a lot for a small bedroom, now can get a lot more. And so Breckenridge, was one of the reasons they started even looking at it, and some of the others was because of what it did to their workforce housing. And it just, boom, went away. The second concern, of course, is neighbors, and neighbors saying, hey, wait a second, I bought a very expensive house in a residential neighborhood, not in a commercial district, and I now have 2 air nib bulbs on either side of me, and people are having parties till 2 o'clock in the morning. They're strangers, they're people I don't know, they're wandering into my yard, and what can we do about it? And so there has become that element of community disruption as well. And so it's an interesting new ball of wax that we all need to look at. But I would hate to think that we're approving new 5,000 square foot homes in Woody Creek or Red Mountain or Castle Creek that are really essentially just going to become quasi-hotels. There also becomes a public health and safety issue. And that is, are there working fire extinguishers in the rooms? Are there tripping stairways? And there have been a few cases now. One was particularly tragic. A fellow rented a room in a house and went out into the backyard and sat on the swing, and the tree branch came down, hit him on the head, and killed him. And there's no insurance, and that's the other thing. A lot of these people do not have commercial insurance. And so if you have a claim, your basic homeowner policy will say, oh, sorry, you're not authorized for commercial property. There's nobody to claim against. And so it does bring up a lot of issues that we just need to eventually get on top of. So I guess
I have one more real quick.
Patty,
I just
please.
got an email from Jenny at TCI about a new bill I want you to keep an eye on. It's the CML bill that was just introduced.
Oh, okay.
About the county roads and bridge mill levies, where the municipalities would require that municipal approval of county budgetary actions as it pertains to the county road and bridge mill levy.
That's an interesting one. I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, and
It
I
just
haven't
came
read
through.
the bill yet.
I didn't either, but
I have a feeling this is a little bit of a poke in the eye from when the counties were saying we wanted a seat at the table on the
Economic
tax
development.
increment financing bill. But right now, as I was explaining earlier, counties are required to share back part of their mill levy. There have been some counties, I think, that have been reducing that mill levy because they've had other funding
projects
sources.
in the county or something.
That's why I was careful to say we, are very careful to do our maintenance and such within our mill levy, because there is a share and there's a reason for that. Even though a lot of our capital work and big projects is coming off of sales tax. If you're doing it off a mill levy, you'd have to increase that mill levy not only to cover the project, but a share back to the municipalities.
I think this is something
so-
that, Rachel,
Yeah.
I'm asking that you can keep an eye on. I think it's important.
Yeah. The process is we'll hear about a lot of these bills on Thursday and Friday this week.
I just thought it was interesting. She
Yeah.
just sent it on us. That really heads up. Like, whoops.
Very interesting.
Okay.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll just amend it so that we can approve their
budgets.
nonprofit granting every year and things like that. Okay.
So how are we doing this transportation? Georgia, do you need a ride somewhere to pick up a car? Are you going to come with us?
I'm just gonna hop on a bus.
And hop off.
Okay.
Okay.
I was going to drive my own vehicle down because otherwise I'm coming back up here and then going back down.
What about you, Rachel?
I would carpool. I thought we had a trailblazer.
We do have a car.
We do.
Okay.
You want to do business with John and I'll go grab the car and bring it out front?
Okay, that sounds great. Do we have any staff who need to drive with us? Do we need to check with Ely?
I'll check with John.
John might wanna come.
We need to go upstairs and sign that letter.
Yeah, so
we
I'll
can-
come up when you're ready.
Okay, and
we'll get the
then,
cards.
Michael, are you carpooling with us?
No.
No, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
We're adjourned.